Brother and sister, I had nice orangey red hair. Yeah.
Strange genes, I don't know what it is.
Like this. That's right. I only need 2 cards to play. Even though we don't now. So.
Yes,
Call the meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States ask for a moment of silence. My mother-in-law is 97. She's very, very sick, and she's probably not going to make it. So I ask prayers for that and anyone that's in the same boat that you know. Okay, thank you. And so we start with a public hearing. Second. All those in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so our first item of discussion is the zoning ordinance. Do I need to read the entire thing, or can I just say the API?
You can just say that applicant protected overlay district ordinance amendments.
Okay, said. And I guess Sean, you'll be presenting on that.
I will, yep, pretty much. So first thing I'll just say real quick, thank you for starting the meeting a little bit earlier at 5 o'clock. There's, with these regulations and just everything else on the agenda, looks like there's lots to unpack tonight. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a slideshow queued up. And for some of you, this will look like a bit of a rehash of some of the things that we talked about initially back in January. But I think just for the purposes of everyone in the room and public education, I think it'd be good to kind of revisit some of the things that we discussed back in January. So I think without further ado, I'll get started on this. So tonight we're here obviously to talk about an update to the aquifer protection overlay district regulations. As far as the presentation overview is concerned, we'll talk about the API generally, and then I'll go through and spend a few minutes and just talking about the timeline of what prompted these changes, where we began to where we are today. And then we'll go into more of a detailed summary of those changes to the regulations and how they differ from what we have on our books right now, and some of those related ordinances, and then finally the recommendations that go along with that. Ready when you, thanks, Aaron. Okay. So the APOD generally, right? So I think is all we know, all of us know, all of our drinking supply here in town comes from our groundwater. And in an effort to protect our groundwater, back in 1994, we adopted our first original set of our APOD regulations. And we made some periodic updates to those regulations, both in 2002 and 2014. And the purpose and the objective of those regulations is to promote the health, safety, and welfare to all of our residents by protecting the quality and quantity of our groundwater supply. So this next slide, this is a map that came out of our comp plan, and it's a map of our geology and our groundwater map. And when we talk about groundwater, we basically have three different categories as it relates to our drinking water supply. We have first our reservoirs in town. Our reservoirs in Richmond pretty much run along the Wood River and connects ultimately to where the Pawcatuck River is in the south end of town. And then we also have a reservoir along the Beaver River, and that also kind of flows into Shannock and Kenyon. Beyond that, we also have recharge areas. That's the areas of our town that run pretty much in alignment with our groundwater reservoir, and those recharge the supply. They recharge our reservoirs themselves. So you have the reservoir that runs along the rivers. You have a recharge area which replenishes that water supply. And then thirdly, you have highlighted in the circular areas on this map, you have our community wellheads. The wellheads are drawn sort of throughout the middle central areas of our town. And those also play a role in providing our water supply to our residents and businesses. Each of these categories all play a role in our potable water supply and protecting our groundwater from potential contaminants. On the subject of contaminants, these are just our typical threats to our groundwater. So as many of you know, right, typical contaminants, petroleum, VOCs, road salts, nitrates, pesticides. In more recent times, we've had to deal with less water supply due to drought conditions. And then in the other column here, you have our sources, and you'll see these are basically the sources of contamination. They come in the form of underground storage tanks, improper waste disposal, septic failures, fertilizers, and pesticide over application, and so on and so forth. So when we talk about our water supply, these are the things that we're trying to look at intelligently to try to minimize the risk to our potable water supply. This next slide, these next couple of slides talk about the timeline of our changes to the APOD. And like I said before, the APOD ordinance was adopted in 1994. And we made a couple of minor amendments in 2002 and 2014. But then more recently, we fast forward to 2022. We adopted our comp plan, our current one. And in April of last year, the state certified it. And then soon after that, we started looking at the goals, objectives, and policies and action items in the plan that the town is responsible for implementing, right? So just because you create a comp plan doesn't mean that you just put it on the shelf. You actually got to start doing the things that are in it, right? And included with those actions was a list of things, land use wise, conservation wise, natural resource wise, economic development wise, right, of things to help sort of move the town to the next 10, 15, 20 years. So when we talk about our comp plan, a lot of the common themes that we have in that plan relate to groundwater protection, monitoring of our natural resources, economic development, and responsible land use policy. All of those themes that you see in our comp plan, right, they're not mutually exclusive. They're all intended to align with one another, right? In other words, the idea of economic development and economic growth responsible land use policy, and protection of our water are all meant to coexist, right? And they're in the regulations that we're going to talk about tonight, right, are making a clear and concise effort, right, to bring all those things, all those elements together. And going back to last year, around January, February of last year, that's really when the planning board started to look at implementing the actions within our comp plan, and it all kind of led to where we are today with our updated APOD regulations. Right? So what prompted us to that point was that we understood, the importance of trying to expand our tax base. We also understood the importance of monitoring and protecting our water supply. We also audited our use code regulations, and we said, okay, what type of uses do we have on our books right now that are permitted outside of the aquifer? What types of uses do we think we can support inside the aquifer that are prohibited today? And that's really where this process really began. We said, okay, I think there's a way to help not just protect the quantity and quality of our drinking resources, but also do it in such a way and do it responsibly where we can introduce uses that are not permitted today into the areas, in our growth areas, into Wyoming, for example, right? Our main growth corridor, our main focus area of our. So along the way, when we went through the summary of our APOD, we needed a groundwater expert, right? We needed someone that we can relay draft regulations by, right? Who understands, hydrogeologic studies, understands water modeling, nitrate loading analysis, all these things that we talk about when we talk about water supply and groundwater monitoring, and obviously activities that sit atop the aquifer. That's where GZA came in. So fortunately, we have GZA as a peer reviewing consultant on contract in 2026. And because of their level of expertise, we were fortunate enough to get Todd Green on board to help us review those the draft regulations. And I don't know if Todd is with us tonight, but he was instrumental in really helping both the planning board understand, what was important to consider, but also looking at it from the point of view of what the development community would be responding to when you look at the draft regulations. In other words, are we able to provide a set of regulations that can be adopted that are reasonable and responsible and not overly burdensome to the development community? And I want to thank Todd Green for his help with that, because I think we did a really good job kind of balance the needs of both the town and obviously the people that want to invest and continue to invest and do business in our town along with that. So I definitely want to give credit to Todd where that's due. Going further from that, we spent most of 2022 updating the regulations. And then that brought us to January this year, where we had our first workshop with the planning board and the town council. And we talked a lot about, things that we're talking about right now. And we presented those draft regulations to you. And I thought we had a very constructive conversation at that time. And we also heard at that time from the Preserve of Boulder Hills. And they did raise some concerns about some of the draft regulations that they would be held to, along with other property owners along the aquifer. And so if you remember, the council said, okay, we heard you, planning board, staff, Preserve, if you guys can work together on trying to address those concerns, we would appreciate it, and hopefully try to find the right balance and common ground. And I think we did that. Between the months of March and May, we for 3 months and 4 planning board meetings later, we worked directly with the Preserve to address their concerns. You'll see those changes reflected in the draft regulations, including your packet materials, chapter 1826 of the regulations. So that brings us to pretty much to May of this year, where the planning board made the final recommendations to you. And at that point, we basically moved ahead and we scheduled a public hearing to consider all these amendments to the zoning map and all the other regulations, the new APOD, repeal of the old APOD, and all the supporting documents and ordinances that went along with that. Yeah. So I want to spend next few minutes just summarizing the changes to the information, to the regulations that you have in front of you tonight. So we created 2 sub-districts of the aquifer. Right now we have 1. We created 2. One of which is called Sub-District A, and one of which is called Sub-District B. Sub-District B is the recharge area. Sub-Districts A are the reservoir and the wellhead protection areas that you're shown on this zoning map. So the reservoir again runs along the Wood River, next to the Pawcatuck River. The reservoir also runs along the Beaver River and flows into Shannock Canyon. The recharge area is a broader area that's in alignment with the limits of where the reservoir is. Right, so you have Sub-District A, you have Sub-District B. There are inherently higher risks of land use, groundwater contamination in Sub-Districts A, because that's a sole source location of where our drinking supply comes from. So you'll see a little bit more restrictive uses in Sub-District A. You'll see less restrictive uses in subcategory B. We're going to get the next few slides. I'm going to go into great detail about what's changed, but that gives you sort of the overall scope of what's changed here. Also, you're going to see inherent to these changes. There's a broader range of uses now permitted within the Wyoming Route 138 infill and growth area. Our existing uses that are in the aquifer right now, existing businesses, existing activities that are in the aquifer today, those remain intact. Just by virtue of adopting these regulations tonight, that doesn't mean that anything changes for any of those existing businesses. They're free to continue on with their uses just as they were right now. For any use that's non-conforming, right? If there's any use that is located in the aquifer now, but wouldn't be allowed today if we were to adopt these regulations, those also remain intact. Right? If for some reason those uses wish to expand or be intensified, they would go through a special use permit process with the zoning board. Classic example, right? Gas stations. We don't allow new gas stations in our aquifer because of the threat of contamination, right? We have gas stations downtown, right? Doesn't mean that they go away. It just means that if they ever want to expand, if they want to resite some of their buildings and some of their, some of their support structures, they can do so by going through a special use permit process through the zoning board review. So that's what I mean by non-conforming uses being able to remain intact and be allowed to continue. I touched on it a moment ago, but uses that create a higher risk to our groundwater contamination remain prohibited within the APOD. Again, gas stations, classic example, textile mills, another great example. Uses that impose a higher risk than other types of uses remain prohibited. And then the regulations also do prescribe standards and a standardized process for permitting new activities within the APOD. I'll get into that in a moment with some of our next slides. Okay. So these next few slides, and I think there's 4 of them, these are showing a list of uses that are prohibited today that would be permitted upon adoption of these regulations. And I broke them down by Sub-District A, which is a little bit more of the higher risk area of our town, and then Sub-District B, which is still in the aquifer, but it's a little bit less of a risk, right? So beginning with, I don't know if I necessarily go like line for every single use, but you'll see examples throughout A and B. You'll see some uses unique to A and unique to B and so on, but multifamily residential, fairgrounds, equestrian academies. We can go on to the next slide, Aaron. Here's more that, again, all of these things are not permitted in the aquifer right now. They would be allowed should we decide to adopt the regulations, car washes, wholesalers with indoor and outdoor storage, guest cottages, and so on. We go on to the next slide. Hair services, dog boarding, kenneling, supermarkets, vehicle leasing. You kind of get the big picture here. Keep going. Right. So in totality, we're introducing, these regulations are introducing 11 new activities within subdistrict A and 27 new activities within subdistrict B. Again, all of these right now, these uses that I just ironed out for you, those are prohibited right now. So these would be permissible upon adoption of the new regulations. Okay. Permitting review. So obviously, a lot of questions were raised about, okay, well, what does that actually mean from a permitting point of view? Well, in today's today's development review environment, permitting environment, right, we basically have two categories or two classifications of how planning permits are done. You have development plan review, and you have major land development. Development plan review is like your typical single lot, single use, commercial type of structure, new construction, right? It goes through the development plan review process. That's planning board review and approval. It applies to your single, again, single construction, single building, new construction, additions. In the case of the APOD, a change of use. And then you have your major land developments, which is the larger scale projects that have multiple uses, multiple buildings, multi-phased over a number of different years. Those also go through the planning entitlement process within the planning board. But what I really wanted to highlight here with these slides is that for development plan review, the regulations provide specificity in terms of what the application would have to show. So, for example, in the case of DPR, the applicant would be asked to provide a summary in their project narrative of the type and quantity of hazardous materials that were being stored on the site. And if applicable, then a spill prevention plan that the planning board can review and better understand. They also would include a preliminary water usage calculation. One thing I want to add to this for both DPR and for major land developments, if you're on the water system, we're doing half of that work for you. So if you're going to be on town water, the applicant brings forward their usage numbers and usage estimates for the project. Our water department then looks at that water usage and basically pulls it into their water model analysis to ensure that our system, our water system, can support the types of uses or the type of use and intensity that the applicant's proposing. And then the planning board during that review process does have the ability to require nitrate loading analysis if there's questions about the concentration of wastewater going through the septic system into our soils. And of course, they could always, as a safeguard, they can always approve conditions of approval just to ensure that there's no undue risk or severe risk to our water sources. And then for the bigger projects, again, these would apply to multiple uses, multi-phases, bigger, larger scale projects that are in the APOD. The application would include, very similar to the DPR, a list of the type and quality of hazardous materials that are being stored on site. If applicable, the spill prevention plan. And then also at the early stages, a desktop hydrogeologic study. And what I mean by that is water usage numbers, soil typology, where the proposed limits of disturbance are, and just to give the planning board a broad understanding of what the larger picture risks may or may not be for the project. The preliminary hydrogeologic study would pretty much apply to whether you're on the water system or not. Or whether you're drawing from private wells, that's fine too. Where field testing comes into play, and that's really where you're doing a much deeper dive into the water usage that's being pulled from the wells and how that might impact the surrounding area and people that also have wells nearby. You're likely to find that in projects where they're not on town water, right? Doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be an issue for the planning board or for staff that's reviewing that, but we just need to get a better understanding of whether or not there's a real risk to our groundwater quality and our groundwater supply. And again, with our bigger projects with major land development, the planning board has the ability to impose conditions of approval to help reduce that undue risk to the project. And then in your packet materials, this slide here just kind of talks a lot about what's required through the adoption process. You have in your packet materials a copy of our current chapter 1837, which would be repealed. That would be replaced with the draft new set of regulations of chapter 1821. And then chapter 1812 basically just provides a little bit of a description of the district and maps that we changed that identify subdistricts A and B. And then you're going to see a big change to our regulations for use code. That's chapter 1816. And you're going to see basically two categories of our aquifer, A and B. And you're going to see what's permitted, what's allowed by special use, and what's not permitted. And then lastly, we included, just because we were working with the Preserve at Boulder Hills on their specific zoning code that they have here on the books in town, chapter 1826, which pertains to them. Again, a lot of the previous approvals and review process associated with the Preserve at Boulder Hills are vested, and the aquifer protection regulations doesn't change really anything that they're planning on doing as part of their phase 2 approvals that was already vetted. And then lastly, the amendments to the zoning map. And zoning map obviously is copies right here. You've all been given the soft copies as well, but it delineates the wellhead protection areas in subdistrict A from the recharge area, which is subdistrict B. And then going on to our last slide, just to summarize, obviously we're here because of the public hearing. Following the public hearing, the staff and planning board's recommendation is to repeal chapter 1837, replace it with 1821, and then adopt the amendments to chapters 1812, 1816, 1826, and the amendments to our zoning map. I think there's one more thing I want to say before I hand it back to you, Mr. President. And I think it's important. In the days leading up to tonight's public hearing, I was made aware of a lot of concerns by some, I think, relatively minor a minor percentage, I think, of the public as it relates to these regulations. And my feeling on the subject is that it was probably based on two things. I think there's a little bit of a lack of understanding to these regulations, what they sought out to do. But unfortunately, I think part of it too, I think, is a little bit of a lack of trust in the process. And the message that I really want to send to you, and I think everyone in this room, and I think people that are on the call, and anyone that's going to be watching the deliberations too, is that if you trust your staff, and you trust your planning board, and you trust your experts, many of whom that are sitting in this room tonight, good things are going to happen, right? But it all begins with a good, firm understanding and trust in the process. And like I said, I think if you do those things, you're going to see the results take place organically. So I think that's important. And thank you for the opportunity to present. I'm here for any answers to any of your questions. Obviously, our town solicitors here, we have members of our planning board here, and we have a lot of members of our public here who I think support these regulations. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your. The next thing I'd like to do is open the discussion up to council. And after council has the answers to the questions that they're looking for, I'm going to open it up to everyone else. So
I'll start. I'm one of those people who trusted the experts, and I changed my vote at the last meeting And after the meeting, I went to meet with some of the big business owners whom I had been told here at the meeting that they were waiting with bated breath for us to approve it. And the ones that I spoke with knew almost nothing about the new guidelines. They were not on the meeting by Zoom. So I felt as if I was deceived. So it does make me
I'm sorry you feel that way.
less stressful.
I'm sorry you feel that way.
Maybe at
I don't
liberty
know-
to say
I don't know
who
what
you
to tell you.
contacted.
I talked to the people at GIF and Richmond Sand and Gravel and the preserve.
Dawn, are the people at GFI, are they affected at all by this overlay?
I don't really want to get into specific developers or property owners. It's not really what the intent of these these ordinances are.
Yep.
But the landowners in this town that have been paying attention are very familiar with these regulations. Some of which will be impacted by the adoption of these regulations, and some aren't.
Impacted in a positive or a negative way?
So, well, for those that aren't going to be impacted at all, they're
Not impacted.
not impacted. Exactly.
Mr. President, I also met with the three partners from GFI, Bill, Steve, and Brian, and met with Dave DeAmber from Richmond Sand and Stone and Richmond Ready Mix, and all of the Reserve. Regarding the alleged comments that the major developers in town were waiting for this with bated breath, so that way they could develop their land. Nothing could be farther from the truth. We can agree to disagree, but no one has the right to buttress their argument with false narratives. I spoke with Bill, Steve, and Brian from GFI, Dave DeAmber from Richmond Sand and Stone, and Mr. Zinni from Capstone. None of these men were familiar with the new aquifer amendments and certainly not waiting for this to pass. Bill Buckley said, I met with Sean a couple of times, had several opportunities to correspond. He talked to me a little bit about it, essentially said, it doesn't really affect us. I haven't verified that. That's a quote from Bill Buckley from GFI. He told me from the position of a developer, more regulations are not really a good thing. Bill from GFI also said,
Respectfully, should we be speaking for others during
I-
public forum, or should we be speaking for ourselves? I'm just asking a question since. Mr. President.
I was gonna let it go, but I'm hoping that this doesn't just,
no,
we
this
don't
is-
get to hear how each developer didn't like
No.
the.
Thank you, Mr. President. Bill from GFI is the last comment from him. Bill from GFI also said that I think at one point, a portion of land was included. In the latest draft, I don't think any of our property is included, but he's not sure. And he's not sure about the buffer zones. And he's not sure about what new reg in the different zones now, A and B. The fact that the boundaries can be redrawn illustrates the arbitrary nature of deciding exactly where to draw these boundaries. Case in point, the Federal Protection Agency put out a report called an evaluation for overlay zoning for wellhead protection. And in that report, it talks about Lansborough, Massachusetts, which states where states hydrologists were unable to agree upon the radius needed for the protection. And there were doubts about what was scientifically justifiable. The report described the same kind of situation in Brookings, South Dakota, where they couldn't agree on how much land the protection area should encompass. So this is just a more arbitrary power to the planning board. The same federal EPA report admits that businesses may wish to relocate where land use restrictions are not as stringent. Businesses may feel the regulations cause economic hardship. The land use controls may discourage new businesses from locating in town. And my final comment, this, however, may be what some people want. While they give lip service to economic development, for example, the entire council sitting here today ran with the reference to the need for economic development.
I have to
However,
cut you off at that point. I don't need to be admonished. Thank you.
you're not being
So.
admonished. And again, Mr. President, you're not taking away my First Amendment right to finish my statement. It's been 3 months. The only action now is a proposal to take away the $150,000 allocated to study zoning and planning regulations and to hire a part-time person devoted to pushing economic development.
Mr. President,
Yeah,
just have 1 minute, start this off early. We're all in a very small one. And there's a lot of people here that don't agree with one another, and you're going to hear things that you don't agree with. I would ask you, please, be civil. And you're in court, church, and keep your comments to yourself, your reactions to yourself. It's okay to feel those things. It's disruptive. And it can be impolite. I'm asking you, please. I don't want to eject anybody from the meeting. We're going 12.5 years, and I never do that. So please respect one another, or at least show respect.
thank you, Chief. So I have a few comments to make as the president of the council. Each and every meeting we have seems to result in a pontification on how 3 members of the council are anti-economic development. Each and every meeting. This is ridiculous. It's disrespectful, it's disruptive, and it's a waste of people's time. We're here to do the business of the people, not to repetitively scold 3 adults that won an election and were elected to the council. I'm tired of it. Speaking as the president, I'm sure that there are other people both out there and on this at this table that are tired of it. When water is damaged, it's damaged forever. We can have great economic development. This actually provides more opportunity for it. To constantly belabor other studies and other things in other states is not addressing our APOD regulations. If there are no specifics as to what doesn't allow economic development, I don't see what the point is.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I'll start off by just thanking our planning board and our town planner and the specialists who came out and took the time to create these ordinances that really does balance 2 really important things in our town. And I wanted to touch a little bit on the buffer zones because after our, sorry, I gotta project. After our workshop that we had, the ordinances went back to the planning board, and that was one thing they discussed at length. And I actually really appreciated their discussion. One of the members really made some great suggestions about having a hard deadline on the buffer zones, and I thought that that was a great way to move. And I'm really happy with the results that came out of us sending it back to the planning board. I'll start with that. I would personally love, I guess only Rich hasn't had an opportunity to speak, but if no other members of council have to speak, if we could hear from the public on what they feel on specifics, that may be great or not.
Thanks, Mark. I look at it like this. The planning board are members of our community. They live in our community. They drink that water. Why in the world would they create an overlay that's going to damage their water? It's their water too. The word regulations is being used as a negative thing. It's actually being used as a vehicle so that you're actually able to do more business. Regulations are there for a reason, to keep the people who are going to do ill at bay. The planning board has the ability to put in their own vehicle to keep people in check, hold them accountable for whatever actions that they want to try to put forward, they have to go through a whole entire process. Sean has laid all of this out. Sean has done more in the 4.5 years than the last 2 planners have done in the past 24. And he has actually set us on an amazing course. And quite honestly, I'm sad to watch him go, but I'm excited because somebody is going to get an amazing person who has an amazing vision, and we're losing it. I'm hopeful that the other 2 members of this council are going to realize that this is a golden opportunity. Instead of looking at a negative, look at what has been given to you on a silver platter so that you can actually achieve the economic growth and the economic development that you so desperately want. If this council had been had the ability to put whatever aside, personal party affiliations, whatever, I don't care, put it aside, we would have actually had shovels in the ground probably about 4 months ago. Those are words from Sean. We would actually already have development going in the Capstone area, in the Richmond Commons area, and you would already see economic development happening. But all haven't had you just can't let some things go. You have to hold on to something. Water under the bridge is water under the bridge. Okay, now cool. Now let's act like adults and let's actually work for our town, because that's all I've ever wanted to do. That's what I'm trying to do. So with that, I yield it to you, sir.
Okay, I'd like to go out to the public, and I'm gonna ask Rich to keep time. I'm gonna try and keep people's comments to 2 minutes.
I'm gonna go 2.5 because that is actually
Okay,
the best, because
Gives them
people
a
can't
warning.
give them that.
right.
I'll go at 2, and I will hold you at it.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, anyone like to come up and weigh in?
A lot of you know me, Bob Sayer, resident of Richmond for 29 years now. So I live in this town. I know about the quality of water and the quantity of water and how important it is. I live in an area that has been compromised by development as far as the wells go. Personally, I think Sean has done an amazing job. The planning board's done an amazing job. As far as Mr. Colasanti was talking about all of these big developers and everything else, and them not having, not knowing exactly what was going on and everything else. Ignorance is unacceptable. If you don't understand the rules, how can you make a comment on it? Now, they went through painstaking, I was at all of these meetings, painstakingly, they went through this thing to make sure that everybody would have an equal opportunity and the best opportunity. But if you don't know what the rules are, then ignorance is unacceptable. It really is. It's unacceptable. So tell these developers that have the problems, why don't they find out? Why don't they attend these meetings? Why don't they see what is going on in this town? If they're that concerned about the groundwater and everything else, if they're interested in polluting the groundwater, we don't need development in this town of that magnitude. Let somebody else take over, solve the problem. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Anybody in the virtual world?
Sir,
Thomas Liguori, Westerly, I'm an attorney, and I principally represent real estate developers. I attended virtually and personally most of the meetings of the planning board, including the first one that I participated in was when the URI study on drawing lines was articulated. I was doing so on behalf of a client, owns property on Stilson Road. Proposed use of the property was equipment rental with on-site outdoor storage. Under the old ordinance, only half of the property could be used, the other half would be in the aquifer protection zone where there was not an A and B. Because of the B, half of the property can be used for the use, the other half of the property is subject to getting a special use permit. That is a positive step. It makes this property more able to be developed. Special use permits in Rhode Island presumptively to be granted. It's only when there's specific reason why the particular special exception shouldn't be granted, special use permit shouldn't be granted on that particular piece of property. That was a great compromise suggested by Sean and articulated by the planning board. I thought the process that I saw here in Richmond with respect to this particular issue was handled most professionally and best of any of these kinds of emotional things that I've seen in my practice of 48 years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Catherine Colasanti from Richmond. So the gentleman said that ignorance is unacceptable. I would say what is unacceptable is saying that developers are waiting with bated breath for something that they have informed to councilors that they are not familiar with. That is unacceptable. Richmond has plenty of land for open space and the outdoor activities we love. The town of Richmond covers an area of 24,000 acres. Out of those 24,000 acres, 14 to 16,000 acres are in conservancy out of 24,000 acres. We don't have to worry about Richmond staying rural. We all probably moved here because we love the country, including myself. A comprehensive town plan has included only a very small portion of our town for commercial and industrial use. And even some of that small area has been taken away and rezoned into residential use. Fox Run and 70 units right smack dab in the middle of the business district. The only danger that can take this beautiful country living away from some of our residents is because they're forced to move because of exorbitant property taxes. Not just what we're paying now, bad enough as it is, but what is on the very near horizon if people don't have the wisdom to push back against rising taxes. We cannot be fooled by lip service, and I'm sorry, Mr. Trimmer, you don't like hearing your constituents, some of their opinions, but that is the democratic process, as uncomfortable as it may be. The only danger that can take away this country living away from some of us is being forced to move because of exorbitant property taxes. There's a proverb that says a wise man sees the danger ahead and the fool runs into it. And I would appreciate you refrain from the ahs or oohs that I expect to hear. Years ago, my husband foretold that one day in the future, for people in retirement age, their mortgage will be replaced by property taxes. And many today can attest that this has come to pass. There is talk about the need for public sewers from the Affordable Housing Committee with an exorbitant price tag. There's talk about the need for more money put into our elementary schools and even talk about expanding town water. There's conversation about wanting a nice new big senior center and that there's a problem with loneliness. All this when the town budget was defeated. The school budget was defeated a couple years ago.
Thank you.
So I'm going to wrap it up with this. The fact that our hope for economic development, one big hope, just please, just 30 seconds more, please.
No,
The fact that
it's like-
Mr. Trimmer, may I please, the bottom line is these big developers are a big hope that we have to expand our tax base. And the fact that they don't understand that is a problem.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Sarah? The gentleman second. Oh, okay.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you, everyone, and I'm very new here. I don't know a lot about politics or issues. I've been living here for a short period of time, since about 2015.
Your name, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, my name is Ken Bowden, and I do live here in Richmond.
Thank you.
And I've been here to help my parents into their final days, inherit their home. And I really don't know anything about the going ons of this town, and I'm here to find out about that. Thank you all personally for your service, because I know a lot of it is volunteer. My concern is, at this point, I'm 65 years old and I'm working full-time plus. And thankfully, the home that I inherited is paid for. But I am concerned about the tax base. And so I did a little bit of research and saw that paying in taxes is very close to a standard mortgage payment for some people. And I'm concerned about that. I do live in a big and beautiful home next to my parents. I'm here to help, to get involved in what way that I can. I'm a little bit concerned about some of the allegations I've heard tonight. And I'd just like to think that a small town like Richmond could set a new standard, perhaps for the whole country, in how we should get along and how we should work out these issues, with hope that integrity, honesty, and dignity could be followed as a standard for personal character. And I'm a little bit disturbed by some of the allegations that maybe information was manipulated or misrepresented. And so I don't know how to address that other than to say that we're here to work together for the town and the people of Richmond. Looking forward to volunteering my time. I'm upset, disturbed at what I'm hearing tonight, including the who's and ahs. When someone doesn't say something we don't like. Spirited disagreement should yield beneficial and profitable outcomes if done in a democratic way. And I don't know anything about this, but I know that much. And that if we do cooperate in a way, then we can find ways to bring business in, because I'm all for that development, but I want to make sure that everything is protected. It took my dad 2 years to get EPA coverage. It took 2 years to get his house approved. So there's a lot of protection in place. I think that means for the rest of these ordinances. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just, we have virtual. I just wanted to make one particular comment, only because this last gentleman brought it up. I was personally at a meeting with a developer, and that developer said that he was looking forward to this aquifer protection plan being passed, so he knew what his goal posts were, where his goalposts were. He wanted it to pass so that he knew now where he stood and what he could do. So that is a fact that that one very important developer stated to me. And let's go to the online. Oh,
Yeah, this, I think this gentleman back here.
yes, sir.
Bruce Olean, Richmond, Rhode Island. I have been told I have a slight hearing loss, but I'm having trouble hearing and understanding. We are a town. We can disagree. I'm getting the impression that some people feel if we disagree, one is bad and one is good. There's nothing wrong with disagreement. It's how you disagree. You mentioned the word civil. Let me give you an example. Mr. Colasanti made some comments. He believes them. I'm going to disagree with him. I'm not attacking him. I have a different opinion. I see a trap that some people are creating. If I don't like what you say, I don't like you. That's not true. If I may civilly just say, based upon Mr. Colasanti's comments, and I believe they're sincere, he took the time to talk to, visit some of the business interests in the town. Probably more good than bad. My question is, why aren't they here? 1, 2, 3, you get the point. There's a lot of people here tonight. And I'll bet they have things that they'd rather be doing. We all do, but we take the time to be here. The interests that were spoken of are very wealthy people. With all due respect, sir, he didn't come, he's paid to. And that doesn't mean you're not sincere. Those people who object are very powerful. They got a bigger checkbook than I do. And that's good for them. They didn't hire anyone to come and address this very thorny but pithy issue. So in summary, we're here, they're not. Even though they expressed an opinion, they didn't take the time to be here and to show us the sincerity of their belief.
Thank you.
Good evening, Jim Turk, Chairman of the Conservation Commission. Thanks for everybody being here tonight. Water is life. People can't survive without water. It's a fact. And so this is a very important facet of our town and our regulations. I think a lot of people have already stated this, but the planning board and Sean have done an incredible job. They had the professionals there that you would expect to have to basically provide that input. I mean, I've been doing ecological restoration for about 30 some odd years now, and I feel like I've learned a lot in my career, but I know there's certain points that you depend on experts that you may not have that expertise in. So all I would say is I think they did a great job. They knew what they were doing by having GZA. And they also were very thorough, as the attorney had said earlier, that they took the time. It was very objective. And to me, that's extremely important. So on behalf of the Conservation Commission, I would just say that I think the way the parameters were set, as Mr. Trimmer indicated, extremely important, because it doesn't prevent development. It doesn't limit development. It helps define how development can occur in a logical way, in a sound environmentally way. And so that to me is extremely important. It doesn't prevent economic development. In fact, I sure hope it actually helps with some good, reasonable, sound development in our town. I mean, I don't think we environmentalists, if people want to point us out as that, we're not opposed necessarily to development. We're in favor of having sound, environmentally sensitive development. I would just add that, I've been to several town council meetings where Mr. Colasanti is, I think you've you've indicated that you have a very strong desire to make sure that your grandchild or grandchildren have something in the future in this town. And the way I look at it is, this APOD was first passed 29 years ago. And I think about what's the future of people that are going to be in this town, like your grandson. And all I could say is we're trying to come up with a good strategy that's going to help them out down the road. So anyway, I just, in terms of the Concom, yep, just like support the full passage of the APOD.
What else? Can't see you, just a hand.
My name is Lauren Keshaw. I live in Richmond. We've lived here for since the pandemic started. Our property taxes are enormous. Why do we need this right now? That's my question. Why right now? I was on council. We had aquifer overlays. Why now? We are right now. 2 weeks ago, my dad was worried about moving because we cannot afford to live here. I work a full-time job. I care about the environment. I really do. But why do we need this? How much is it going to cost? What's going to go into this? We need to have a compromise, and people disagree or agree, and I hear people talking.
Address the council.
But at the same time, again, what is this going to do to us? How is it going to affect the people We don't know how much it's gonna cost. Businesses are leaving us. They've left us when I was on council. We denied access to multiple things because the planning board said so. If you want to look back and do your research, look back and do your research. They've laughed at people, they've done that. And this is now I'm going to speak about it because I'm tired of it. Thank you.
Anyone else in the room? We got this young lady here and
I wish I were young.
Dan.
Joan Kent. I love you too. It's Joan Kent. I live in Richmond. I'm in Richmond Hills. Let me read this to you. I carefully wrote this out. After a review of all the information on the aquifer plan, I have come to the conclusion, and you may not agree with me, and that's perfectly fine, that I oppose the new aquafilter overlay protection directive. The new plan would put in place additional unnecessary requirements, measures, standards that would not be beneficial to economic development and growth. The requirements and provisions would stifle and hamper approval processes for new business and development by adding even more costs and fees to those businesses and developers. More regulations, etc., are not always good. Okay. Estimated costs for some of these projects could be in the $30–40 million amounts. It could exceed that and increase to the cost of the project by millions more dollars. Because of the poor financial climate today, high interest rates and inflation, everything costs more. It could probably cause a bankruptcy in the town. The plan would also put undue burden on the backs of taxpayers who already feel the strain in their wallets due to the increases in everyday cost of living and property taxes. By the time the sewers are put in, I'll probably be dead. I am 76 years old, example of something. My husband and I, we were about 28 years old when we bought property in Warwick. It's taken it was about 28 years old when we bought them. I am 76, as I said. It took 48 years to put in the sewer lines this year in 2023. So that's all I have to say. And I know that you all work hard. And I think we all are trying to do the best for the community. And I don't have any anger towards any one of you.
Thank you.
Just to present my views. Thank you very much.
Dan?
Excuse me.
Dan Madnick, 8 Excalibur Drive, Richmond, Rhode Island. I'm going to read from a prepared statement. I'm here today as a resident of Richmond and a volunteer with the planning board. As a member of the planning board, I spent a lot of time and a lot of effort developing this ordinance. Proud of that. The planning board used examples from across the country, from Maine to California, for seeking expertise to finalize this ordinance. We knew we couldn't do it ourselves, so we sought out a consultant that could help us finish it, make sure we weren't overburdening this town. Economic development and protecting water resources. That is the goal of the revision of the APOD ordinance. I want to point out some important aspects of the revised ordinance. Previously, any property that was touching the APOD was required to meet the regulations within the ordinance, regardless if only a tiny sliver was touching the overlay. With the new ordinance, only the areas that are disturbed are required to meet the regulations, unless a desktop hydrogeological study concludes otherwise. Which, by the way, some of the requirements that people mentioned tonight are already required, they're already in our ordinances. We're not adding undue burden and additional requirements that we already don't ask for. The use code table has been open to more uses. In doing so, the ordinance requires some containment measures, which can be installed for a small nominal cost. Discussed at length with the consultant and the planning board. The benefits of opening the use codes outweigh the drawbacks of an additional small outlay by the developer. Keep in mind, We're trying to protect our sole source aquifer at the same time allowing for new and continued development. I've spoken with 4 out of 5 town council members, and you all know who you are, in great detail regarding this ordinance and the importance of its adoption, not just for the protection of the aquifer, but for the future of Wyoming. Wyoming is located central to the APOD and has been underserved and ignored for far too long. If this ordinance is not adopted, it will perpetuate the continued ignoring of a central area of Richmond and prevent what this town council has been working towards the most, economic development. It would be a shame for a few outspoken people to undermine the goals and wishes of the other 8,000 members of this community, whom you all represent. I want to be very clear. Richmond residents desire changes in Wyoming and a future for Richmond Commons. The current planning board is flexibly minded and engages productively with developers to meet their needs and the needs of the town. Adopting the APOD ordinance is the first step in the process to realizing the full potential of Richmond's primary economic growth area. Thank you.
Sir.
Hi, I'm Pete Burton, Richmond, Rhode Island, and a new member of the Economic Development Commission. But I'm speaking personally. I believe that the town planner and everybody involved has done a tremendous job in developing this plan for us. I urge you all to support these amendments. And I have heard that some folks in this room disagree with this because they believe that it's going to cost money. Honestly, this is pro-business. This is pro-economic development, which means your taxes will go down when more businesses move into this town. And it's a good thing for our town. I urge you all to support the proposed amendments. Thank you.
Pamela Rowland, I live in Richmond. We have a property not too far from Stilson Road. Our water right now is pristine. We lived there for 28, 29 years. And I want to keep it that way because if water's contaminated, we have no property left. And I think that's true for the businesses that come in here, that if the water is contaminated or things go wrong with the water, the businesses have nowhere to go either. And it seems to me from what I've heard that the restrictions are fewer, not more. And that I agree with the people that have said when we bring businesses in and we can guarantee them a protected water system, because that's all we have in Richmond is this aquifer. And it's a wonderful aquifer and it's like we need it. And so I urge all of you to approve the plan, because if we have no water, we have nothing, and this plan seems to protect it for a long time.
Read it as an universal world.
Yes, can we?
You should have permission.
He's muted.
Mr. President, this is Rick Zini with Capstone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, good evening. Appreciate the opportunity to speak. Again, my name is Rick Zini. I'm a representative with Capstone Properties. Just want to make a couple of quick statements on the record. As Capstone's name has been brought up on multiple occasions, including this evening, I think it's clear to everyone to understand that there are large commercial taxpayers in the town, such as Capstone, that are watching the process and are informed about the proposed regulations. Capstone has not spoken in favor or against the regulations, but has been observing in recent weeks the process that has been happening. I think it's important also to state that before new development can happen in the town must decide what it wants for development and how that is regulated. That needs to be settled before any developer or major taxpayer is going to make additional investment in the town. It's also important to state that Capstone believes good development happens with both protecting the town's natural resources and working with the town and its vision. So I think it's important that the town decide what it wants for development, what it wants for regulations, and then the taxpayers in the commercial district can decide what works with the town for future development. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you, Rick. Do we have any other virtual?
Mr. President,
Yes, ma'am.
hearing nobody, motion to close public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Now, to vote on these amendment, do we need?
Can I do it all in one motion? Yes. All right, Mr. President.
Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned all of the parts of it.
I'm gonna read it. Okay. Motion to repeal chapter 18.37 of Aquifer Protection Overlay District. The adoption of chapter 18.21. Amendments to chapter 18.12 District and Maps. Amendments to 18.16 Use Regulations. Amendments to chapter 18.26 Plan Development Resort District, and amendments to the zoning map.
Second.
Thank you.
Okay,
Discussion, real quick.
any further discussion?
Yes. Real quick, Mr. President, I just want to thank everybody who took the time to come out to speak today, because it's really important that we hear from you, and I just love it. The protection of our groundwater really needs to be a priority for the health and safety of our residents, visitors, and our ecosystem. Economic development is a need in Richmond for many reasons, and this new APOD ordinance amended APOD ordinance allows for 27 additional permitted uses, which will facilitate just that. In my opinion, this ordinance is a win-win for both those initiatives, and I think it's also important to remember that we can change this. If somebody comes to town and wants a use that is not currently permitted, that is something we can consider, we can look at, and we can act accordingly. So with that, I'm ready to vote.
Mr. President, which makes me look hard and fast on this. Being on the council now for about 7 months, when I look at how our tax rate has jumped over the last 6 years, when I look at the team that's been in place, and as a business owner, I would look at my team to say, why is my business not profitable? So when I look at what the mode of action has been the last decade, and when I look at how the taxes have increased over the last 6 years by over 33%, whatever the team is doing, it's not working. And I can just see the team digging their heels in more in protecting something that's already protected. And when I look at these new uses that are going to be permitted in the new A and B zones, there's an S there. That means there's a special use permit. That means you still have to go before the planning board and they can still deny you. Now, what would have been a better selling point for me is if there was a P next to those, not an S. Then I would agree with all of you 100% that this is going to be better for the town. And we're going to actually add more permitted uses. To me, it's kind of like almost a bait and switch. Again, I would have been on board with this 100% if there was a P next to those, not an S. And I've been around the block too many times to know that when you've got the S there, that really opens it up to interpretation and what that present planning board is feeling at that point in time. So again, I want to see economic development, push economic development, and make it easier for the businesses. Now, over the last 4 months, Councilman Slaney said that there was a possibility that we could have been a shovel in the ground. That's being a new council did not stop that. previous councils that made policy prior to us making policy right now had the effect of that those shovels not going in the ground 4 months ago. Had nothing to do with this present council sitting here right now. Thank you.
I've told my story before. I live down the street. I live right on Route 138. And a year and a half after I moved into my house, I couldn't drink my water. My well was contaminated with mercury. My neighbor's well was also contaminated with mercury. And up the hill, in a pit, is a gigantic appliance dump, which has now been covered up. The expense that I had to spend, it was probably along the lines of about $15,000. First, I had people work on my well and they couldn't clean it up and they couldn't find where the problem was. So then I had to go to Plan B. Plan B was to connect to the town's water supply. And I think I was one of the first residential customers that connected to the town's water supply, but I had to pay somebody to run the line, pay somebody to come in and put in a meter, and pay somebody to connect me up, and I'm still paying. And my water bill came in the other day, and it's double what it, or 50% higher than it was a year ago. The long and the short of it is, if that water gets contaminated, if that water is dirty, then what? What do we truck it in from another neighborhood, another town? What do you do? It affects everyone's life. And with that, I'm going to put it to a vote. How do you vote?
Nay.
Nay.
Yay.
Yes.
Yes. Mr. President?
Yeah.
Motion to open public hearing for the proposed amendment
Second.
to chapter 9.06 of the Richmond Code of Ordinances.
Second.
Okay, excellent. How do you vote? To open.
I
Yes.
Aye.
Okay. Public meeting is open. Chief, did you want to address this amendment?
I guess I could let it stand on previous comments for the sake of time, but essentially it's already unlawful to smoke in closed spaces. This is basically putting that out to open spaces. And because of the legalization of marijuana recreationally, our concern is the inability to protect people in the town. You take your 10-year-old child to a ball game, person sitting next to you is lighting up. And really, I mean, what are we going to do if we don't have an ordinance in place? Demolish that, tell them to put it away, or charge them with this civil infraction. That's the purpose of it, is to protect people to enjoy open space in town without having to be subjected to the odor or irritant. I have a nephew with cystic fibrosis. If he's exposed to any smoke, he's compromised. His immune system's compromised. It's not personal. It's just I'm giving you the example of there are people in our society that deal with it.
Thank you. So at this point, I'm going to open it up to council questions or comments, and after that's completed, we'll go to the public.
Yes, Mr. President. Oh, great.
All right, so I thought about this as well, so. I want all of us to retain as much freedom as possible. Therefore, I support limiting the reach of control into people's lives as much as possible. Having said that, we do not allow public consumption of alcohol, and I think that the same rule should apply to marijuana use. Both substances impair a person's judgment. I do not support a ban on smoking cigarettes in an outdoor public place, because that's the way this was written. It included regular cigarettes. I agree that cigarettes are cancer causing, but that does not give me the right to control it. People have said that secondhand smoke increases their chance of getting cancer. They may be correct, but there's a difference in air quality when indoors and when outdoors. So I would support not having marijuana be smoked in a public place, but not to limit cigarettes.
Mr. President, I agree with Councilor Sheehan. We're raising seat with one another. I'm not one for wanting to limit people's personal freedoms, but I consider marijuana, I've got multiple family members in law enforcement. And a lot of times when they're pulled over, a lot of times it's not only alcohol related, but there's also drug abuse too. And it seems to be a scary trend that's getting more and more these days. But with that being said, I consider marijuana like being illegal to have an open container, drinking in public. Driving your vehicle with an open container of alcohol, whether it be vodka or beer, it's not legal. So with that being said, smoking a cigarette does not impair somebody's ability to drive a vehicle. But marijuana does, especially with the TSG that is so high today compared to the 70s. It's like 4, 5, 10 times the amount that are in the cigarettes. So with that being said, I don't want to take away the freedom of somebody being able to smoke a cigarette as they're walking down Main Street in front of a Cumberland Farms after they just bought their pack of cigarettes. But I do see the difference between marijuana smoking and cigarette smoking. And I would like to see the two separate and just have the marijuana use in this ordinance.
Mr. President,
Yes.
last time we met, we pushed this to public hearing, and I thank Chief Johnson for answering my questions. And I just wanted to say that that's actually one of the questions I had. It had nothing to do with cigarettes, it had to do with why our ordinance didn't align more closely with the fact that people are driving and using under the influence of a mind-altering drug. A lot of those concerns are handled with state law, so the police can still, I don't know, do their job, to put it simply. So I agree that it's not good for people to drive around. But this ordinance here is specific to the nuisance of secondhand smoke and the harmful effects it has on you as a person. And if you're walking through our parks and you're getting smoke in your face, or if you're at the ball field and you're getting smoke in your face, that's what this ordinance is about. I'm in favor of it.
Okay. Rich?
I don't really need to go on and on.
Okay, all I'm gonna say is this. I drive a lot, and that means I fill my car up every day. And I go to a gas station and there's a whole bunch of people sitting outside the gas station smoking a cigarette. It isn't the liquid gasoline that catches on fire, it's the vapors. That's how an engine works. It works on vapors, not liquid gas. And I think this would go a long way to allowing somebody to be cited for this, or them to be stopped for that, smoking in public at a gas station. So in any case, I'm for it. And now I open this up to the public and any public comments. Sir, man. I thought it was the gentleman behind you's arm for a second.
Goldie Williams, Richmond. I have severe asthma, severe COPD, and my lungs are shot because of cigarette smoke that my father smoked. And if it was outside, any kind of smoke, even marijuana, it affects me. That I'm wheezing. I'm on this 4 times a day, sometimes 6. I'm on 2 times a day on my nebulizer, plus medicine. So it would affect me all this outdoors, no matter where it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once? Okay,
Motion to close public hearing.
Second.
all those in favor of closing public hearing?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
all right. I know.
Motion to approve chapter amendments to add chapter 9.06 to the Richmond Code of Ordinances.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Nay.
On the consent, Mr. President. Mr. President, on consent agenda, can I pull 1C and 5, please?
Let me see.
And I'd like to pull. Also, you finished? You're done. I'd like to pull under consent agenda ED.
There's no E.
You mean number 2, E? B. Oh, I thought you said E.
1B,
1B.
and I'd like to pull 2F.
Move to approve the consent agenda 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 with the admissions of those polls.
Which was 5, just to clarify.
1 through 4.
Seconded?
Okay, ready to vote?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So just to go in order, the first item pulled was 1B. Those are executive session minutes, so I believe we have to have an executive session to discuss them because those are sealed. But somebody can correct me if I'm wrong.
Was that the item you pulled? Or I-
That was one you pulled out. I'm just going in order.
All right, I pulled it, so I'd like to speak on it.
Those can't.
Yeah.
Sorry, they were sealed, so.
Well, no, I'm not gonna talk about the minutes themselves.
Well, then, that's not on. The agenda item is the approval of the town council minutes.
Right.
So if we're gonna discuss the minutes, we need to go into executive session to do so. I mean, we can schedule a time to do that.
I'm not gonna discuss the.
So if you're not discussing the minutes, then you're discussing something that's not on the agenda.
Discussing the topic, we're discussing the minutes. We're approving the minutes or just not approving the minutes.
Well, we shouldn't approve the minutes because we just got them today. And it does not give us enough time.
But
to-
we were all there.
What's that?
We were all there in the minutes. reflect.
When we get the executive session minutes, they're given to us prior to the council meeting. And I requested hard copies prior to the council meeting so I can look at them. So that way, if there's any adjustments that have to be made, I'll have plenty of time to do it. I had requested of the town clerk to add these to our packet. And she claimed that that's not the way we do it. I called the Attorney General's office and I got a ruling. And we can't get executive session minutes in our packet. School committee does it, they get the executive session minutes in their packet. So I would like us to get our executive session minutes ahead of time, so that way we can read them and fully disseminate them.
You have the ruling?
Mr. President, maybe the agenda item really was approval of town council minutes. If we're gonna change the procedure about how we receive the minutes, that may need to be its own separate item for discussion for another time. I don't know.
Yeah, I just wanted to discuss why I pulled that.
I suggest that you make a motion to request that it be placed on the agenda of the next town council meeting for discussion.
Mr. President.
Yeah.
I personally arrived 10 minutes before the meeting and had time to read it.
Right, I
So
was
I'm
here
happy
half
with,
an hour before.
That's really what the purpose is of it being sealed and on our desk. We get here, we read it.
man. The other reason why executive session minutes are handed to you just before the meeting is because they're executive session minutes. You read them
And you give
right
them
here
back.
and you give them back. Giving them before a meeting gives the opportunity for that information to be put out into the public, shared with people who are not privy to that information. That is why executive session minutes are given to us just before a meeting. They're not lengthy. It was a page and a half, and that was it. It's water under the bridge. Let's move on, please.
Okay, no, just to counter your comments there, because you seem to be the expert on that. My wife, when she got on the school committee, she requested
Thank you,
a
ma'am.
ruling from the AG's office. And they said that you can get executive session minutes, and Mr. Anderson, the school attorney, that yes, you can. And they get their minutes prior to any meeting, and they're not worried about them being.
Okay, so
Can
I'm
I
gonna,
interrupt to say that I think you're discussing something that's not on the agenda?
right,
And my suggestion is that someone make a motion to put this as an agenda item on the next town council agenda, so that you can discuss it as a matter of policy and make a decision and direct the town clerk how you would like it to be done in the future.
Is that allowed to make that motion right
Yes.
now? Okay, so be it. You put it so eloquently.
Thank you.
very
That's my
much.
job.
and do I have a second on that?
Second,
All those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
No,
Aye.
Okay, the next item,
1C.
C.
Sorry, 1C I pulled just because there were some items I wanted to add to the public forum section. It was on page 3. Where it says Kristen Chambers shared a poem. I feel like she shared more with the poem. She shared her opinion, so I'd like it to read, Kristen Chambers shares her poem about her disapproval with the enabling action, legislation, sorry. And another resident, Mark Reynolds, spoke, and what it was on there was fine, but I wanted to add that he also disagreed with Ms. Dinsmore's opinion regarding social media posts and explain the difference between the school committee list in the town, because he touched on 2 items. I just want to make sure our people, they took the time to come here to speak. I want to make sure it's up there.
I didn't hear the first suggestion.
The first suggestion was where Kristen Chambers shared a poem. She shared a poem about her disapproval with enabling legislation. She didn't read it at her own poem, you know? So I'd like to,
Did she read it into the record, Council?
well, not like into the record, so it's not gonna say verbatim what she said, but just not, she shared a poem. It wasn't just a poem about a flowery day. It was a poem about her disapproval of something. So just to make it specific, if that's okay. Also where it reads, Town Solicitor Ellsworth shared her concern with Councilor Colasanti proceeding. She actually wasn't able to share her concern because she was cut off and dismissed. All she said was Finally, on page 5, after the motion to advertise the APOD for public hearing, I just want it to be noted that I did explain my motion was to advertise for public hearing, not for the approval of the ordinance amendments. And that is important to hear from any and all interested parties.
Okay.
I would like to then, if nobody else has anything to change, make a motion to approve the June 20th, 2023 minutes with those amendments.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
aye,
Aye.
All right, and next item is,
Item number 5.
well, actually, number 2, F. Why was that pulled?
I pulled it, 'cause I don't know if the human service director is here. But I'm like, interested in knowing what kinds of services were provided to the 53 residents. And also, she said in her report that she set up for 2 free boxes of fresh produce per year to seniors. And I want to make sure that she knows that people can get fresh produce and fresh meat and food from RICAN every week. And if you can't get there, RICAN will deliver it.
It's, Mr. President?
Yeah.
I noticed in her memo that she did say if you have questions, she'd be happy to come to a future meeting. So maybe if you want to hear from her, you can make a motion to, you know,
Yeah, I
ask her to
think
come to the
so.
next meeting.
I thought she might be here.
I think we'd have, because she's a part-time employee.
Okay.
Council, excuse me, Mr. President, Council, were you asking for her to have a breakdown in her report? What these specific calls were, if there were like 3 people inquiring about rent assistance. The
Yeah,
taxes,
I'd like to know what kind of
calls,
calls.
service.
don't you think that that might be a little personal?
I'm not asking for names,
Names.
but you know, my concern right along has been that RICAN can probably do close to 100% of what she's doing.
I know, but respectfully, we are going into the same issue with the same item, or the other item, where now we're talking about an item that's not on the agenda. This is literally just a consent agenda. If you have questions, concerns, comments, amendments to minutes, kind of what our consent agenda is for, so we should put this on the future agenda, just like we did the other.
I would just like to vote to approve it now. Move on.
I would love
Yeah, we
that.
can approve it.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Aye,
Aye.
thank you.
Just
And
to-
last-
I'm sorry to go back to approve 1B. Or make any action regarding.
to approve 1B.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Okay. And lastly is consent agenda number 5.
Sorry.
motion to approve. Oh,
Sorry
I'm
to pull so many. I just had a quick statement, I guess. Last meeting, I asked about Attorney Laris's bill, and at the time we didn't receive it, but we were given an estimate of 25,000. The bill has since been produced. I received it after this was put up here. The amount was actually $21,792.50.
Further, I looked at the invoice and there's 3 charges for which I don't think we should pay. We didn't hire until the 25th, but on the 23rd and 24th, he charged us for drafting and filing a writ that Clay Johnson personally filed. He also asked us for $155 for reimbursement for filing that writ. And he also charged us for attending the school committee meeting on the 24th. Richmond Town Council did not authorize him to file that or attend the school committee meeting on our behalf, and he charged us an additional $3,811.25 for the services. So I would approve everything else in the appropriation of payments and bills except that item. And if I could make a motion to approve every other one except that item, I will do it.
I agree with you.
Could I just interject one thing? In order for the town to be represented in that case, he would have had to file a petition that was separate from the Clay Johnson petition, so he would have had to pay $150 plus $4 service charge, which they make you pay because it's an electronic payment. So I suggest that you reimburse him for the $150 because he would have had to pay that anyway and did pay it.
We hired,
But the rest of it, I don't have any comment. That's up
Yeah.
to you guys.
we did hire him just to defend. We didn't hire him to file.
Well,
Well, how
thought
do
you
you
had to
how do you
file.
defend if you don't?
yeah, you have to.
He would have to enter his appearance and do a response.
Well,
That's
I,
how long I don't.
all right, well, I don't-
$20,
$50,
All right, or I'll split the hairs on that. I mean, I won't,
but the $3,000.
for the $3,000. So,
Can we please make a motion to get an explanation from Attorney Larissa regarding the $3,000 before we make a decision?
what I would,
I think we should just pay the bill.
what I'm saying is like, we approve everything else except that. That way we can get a new invoice or an explanation.
okay, so you're making a motion.
My motion is to approve all the appropriation of payments and bills except for Attorney Larissa's.
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor?
Nay,
Nay.
Aye.
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 Okay, moving to public forum. Okay, we'd like to again keep the comments to 2.5 minutes and the discussion to be respectful and civil. Is there anyone who'd like to come up and make public comments? No one? Okay, virtually.
Yes, you should have permissions.
Yep, I should be good. Good evening, everyone. Jessica Purcell, Richmond, Rhode Island resident. Thank you for allowing me to speak from home today. I planned to attend in person, but my day was upended by some happy news, and I have a lot of work to catch up on tonight. As always, I truly appreciate the option to participate virtually. I'd like to share the news that today, a 4-to-1 majority of the Rhode Island Supreme Court ruled in favor of granting the petition I filed in January after Mr. Trimmer, Ms. Sheehan, and Mr. Colasanti voted against my appointment to fill a vacancy on the Charahoe School Committee, despite the clear and specific procedure detailed in the town charter that instructed them to do so based on the 2022 election results. Like many, I found this violation to be an egregious affront to all voters of Richmond. Unlike many, I was the aggrieved party who had legal standing to do something about it. With the support of our community and friends and family, I was able to pursue justice in this matter. And after 6 months, the Supreme Court has granted my petition, affirming that I am legally entitled to a seat representing Richmond on the Charahoe School Committee. I look forward to serving on the school committee in service of our town and our schools as a partner to all stakeholders. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jessica.
Jessica, I just want to say one thing real quick. Congratulations on your appointment. And it's great to see that the democratic process works. And somebody asked me months and months ago what my reaction would be if it was not Clay Johnson, it was Ms. Purcell. I said I would congratulate her and the democratic process works. And now we move on. And hopefully we can put this now behind us and work forward for the betterment of the community at this point. And I would love to see that. And I sincerely, congratulate you on your success.
we're looking for a candidate for that position. There were things that that I was looking for the candidate. And there was a question about which law took precedence. We asked for a legal opinion from our solicitor, and we followed that opinion, which said that state law took precedence over town law. So as far as I'm concerned, our interest was in the good treatment, the best position person for that job. So I want to say congratulations to Jessica. I'm sure things will go fine, but I know that Justice Goldberg and our solicitor had a different opinion about that decision. So the law, we follow the law, and we're happy to move on.
We're moving forward.
Amen.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that has any public comment? Ma'am.
Lauren Cashel from Richmond, Rhode Island. I just want to congratulate Jess on winning her seat. You know, she fought tooth and nail, and she definitely did a good job. My concern has been and was on council, when I was formerly on it, was and again, this is not personal, it's not anything to do with anyone's position, but the advice that we were given through Solicitor Ellsworth. I feel like some of the information was skewed, and wasn't properly vetted. There's certain examples of that. And I can, through the videos. So recently the solar program, was denied, and now we're going back. So we're spending more money to do that. So we're appealing it. So now we're spending more money to appeal something that's already been done in the Supreme Court. So that's one example. So you all agree upon it as a council, except for two. So I think we should look at what our priorities are and how much we're spending on these things.
Thank you. Any further comments?
Ivor Lipton, resident of Rhode Island. Ivor Lipton, a resident of Rhode Island. Are you telling me that you're going to appeal this decision that you were given?
No, you
No.
can't appeal.
Good.
It's the Supreme Court.
Yeah, well, I thought so.
it's
But I thought
final.
she was saying we're going to appeal.
It's
I'm glad
it's
you're
a
not.
final decision, and
Wonderful.
I welcome Jessica to the school committee, and we're going to look forward to working with her and moving forward.
Good.
Okay, that being said, we're going to move on to reports and ask Karen to give her report.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first item I have on there is Juneteenth, and I was prepared to discuss it, and now there is some conflicting information about whether the town is required to observe that, and obviously, if we are not, then you all have to make a decision on that, but I'd like to move that forward to a future agenda. Secondly, at the last meeting, you all approved.
Could you just explain that a little bit more, like what you mean?
So the state did, the legislature did adopt Juneteenth as a holiday. But there is some question as to how it is celebrated and whether it applies to municipalities. We will get that information. There's plenty of time before January, which is when it is enacted. Yeah. Secondly, I had brought some information to you regarding a request to submit a grant for the Learn 365 program. We did submit that grant in the amount of $50,000. Kudos actually to Kate, our Human Services Director, for spearheading that project. The $50,000 will pay for teachers and guidance counselors, professional tutors either from URI or elsewhere, bus transportation, facility rental space, materials and supplies, and equipment such as a smart board. And we're hoping to have a decision on that by the end of this month, so hopefully by next week.
But Karen, the only question I had about that is the rental, you know, the $9,000, I think. Is there some way we can work out something with the school where we won't have to pay? Because I'd rather see that 9,000 go into paying more tutors to help more kids than just pay for a facility for them to come in. The schools are already open pretty much all summer time long. Is there maybe something we can, you know, reach out to them and see if we can get some space for them?
We can certainly talk to them. I'm not sure how much, I mean, I would imagine we'd be allowed to alter the grant, but we can certainly look into that. Next, I just wanted to update you on a couple of initiatives. They're actually related to ARPA funding and the dog park grant. We have the DEM recreation grant for construction of the new dog park. And Scott is working with the dog park committee to get the specs together so we can post a bid for that fence. So that's coming up. Secondly, one of the things you all agreed to fund in ARPA was a new generator for the town hall. The current generator is a hand-me-down from the PD, and it does not power this whole building. We'd like to upgrade that to something newer and better. Jeff Valancourt, our electrical inspector, has offered to do a load test, which Scott recommended that we need to determine exactly what we need in a generator so that we can figure out what the specs need to be to post, but we're making progress on that.
Is there any worth to the old generator that we put it up for sale and get something for it?
I'd have to look into that. I don't know.
Maybe
Maybe it's
Jeff,
like
Yeah.
25, 30 or so.
maybe Jeff can,
I wouldn't recommend,
no, okay, go, that'll,
wouldn't want the liability. Either.
Next thing I wanted to discuss was the municipal road grant. That grant opportunity will open on August 1st. They did change the funding a little bit, so that initial 5 million will be split equally amongst the cities and towns, so that's $128,205 for Richmond. The rest of the money is based on non-federal lane miles in each city and town. So in Richmond, that's just about 76 miles, which is only 1.88% of the total in the state, but that's another $282,594. So the total state contribution is $410,799. The total match required by the town would be $834,047 for a total project value of $1,244,847. So that will go a long way towards paving roads.
yeah.
Awesome.
So Gordon Rogers was right on spot with that.
They did change it a little bit,
Yeah.
but he was right that there was a grant
Yeah.
coming.
Good. And, you know, just, you know, discussing this a little bit further, we have that $2.5 million grant that the town went out and approved last
Bond.
summer.
Bond,
Yes, the bond.
Yep.
I think it's a good opportunity for us to decrease that bond. And we plug in the 410,000. And we don't go out to bond for the whole thing, the 2.5 million. We go out to bond for 2.1 million.
We could put it on the agenda for future discussion.
Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. Yep. Aaron, you got a preemptive strike on that one.
Is there a motion for our future agenda? Are you gonna send it?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Hi.
Next, I just wanted to give an update on the roundabout project. In the last month, they've installed utility poles and lines have been relocated on both Richmond Townhouse and Caroline Gooseneck. There is overnight work scheduled for July 20th. We were actually notified by National Grid that we're gonna lose power in this building at 11 o'clock at night. They've removed curb boulders, walls and signs on 138 east and west, project wide, and the water line is 50% complete. In the next month, they're gonna continue to work on that water line and complete it. They will be widening areas of 138 east and west at right here in the intersection at Richmond Townhouse and Carolina Newstead. And just to remind everyone who's concerned, that project is shut down during fair.
Awesome.
One question. When the power is out for the town hall during that overnight, will there be a police detail watching over the town hall? Even though there'll be construction guys or whatever, will there be a police detail circling around? Because there won't be any power, there won't be any security, there won't be any.
I mean, certainly, they check the town hall on a regular basis anyway. I mean, she can speak to it more, but I'm sure they will. And
We'll just increase frequency of checks.
Yeah, chief, we have
Thank
to,
you,
we have to protect the executive session minutes.
Here with the generator, so I left the keys for getting in and out. We haven't replaced it yet. If we don't have
we don't have the new doors yet, so we haven't changed the locks.
Okay.
But they were here yesterday, taking the measurements, and so we're finally in.
Okay.
May I ask a question about Karen's report? Louise Dinsmore, Richmond. Hi, Karen.
Hi.
I just have a quick clarifying question about the generator. So, in the American Rescue Plan funds that, Laura was very gracious and sent to me today. Thank you so much, Laura. There was $30,000 allocated for generators for the town hall. Is this in addition to the generator thing that you just mentioned? Is this in addition to what was already allocated from ARPA?
No, I think
it's the
that's
same
it.
one
That's-
that
the same-
is the
yeah.
same project.
Okay, okay. So are we using this $30,000 for a new generator that you just referenced?
Right.
Or
Yeah.
because the other one is too old?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, thanks.
Okay, chief.
Evening, folks, how are you? First of all, I want to congratulate everybody in this room who worked together. Last 15 minutes, we did it. We jacked the heat up 5 degrees. It was 72 when we started, we're 77. Not getting any warmer than that. Listen, it's an honor to be up here to share with you some of the things that I'm aware of and privy to, only because I have police officers that work in town and I see their body worn cameras. And I'm aware of the calls that they go to. And I think it's easy to assume nothing happens in smaller places. It's not accurate. These guys are going call to call nonstop. On the way to the council meeting tonight, there was a head-on crash right in front of Growing Crazy. But the things I want to share with you tonight are actually life-saving actions by a couple of police officers. Back in 2015 or 16, we began carrying tourniquets on our uniform. It's very frequent in an area like this. It's a remote area. Rescue may take time to get there. Our officers are often first on scene and they might be there for 10, 15 minutes before an EMT arrives. So they were using, unconventional belts and things like that you would see in the movies, trying to slow the blood flow so that people stay alive until they get to the hospital for life-saving medical treatment. On June 30th, just shortly after midnight, Patrolman Anthony Mayola was on patrol, and Paul Marshall had just stopped the vehicle right near the town line with Hopkins, just into Hopkins. There was a horrific crash right in the area of St. Joseph's Church. Most of you are familiar with that, on Main Street near the ball fields. Now, this is at about 12:15. Most of us probably in bed, and I'm not trying to out somebody for being out drinking or having a good time. I'm just telling you, most of us are sleeping comfortably. These officers are thrust into these situations where someone is bleeding profusely, crying in pain. This particular crash, a motorcyclist is traveling north on Main Street in Hope Valley. A vehicle going southbound tried to turn in to a driveway that he missed, and he ended up striking this guy and pinning his leg against the bike and ejected him onto a lawn. Imagine the speed of your vehicle versus the speed of an oncoming vehicle. When those collisions happen, there's a lot of trauma, impact trauma. Officers arrived on scene. It's dark, it's chaotic. He goes up. Now I watched the body cam on this. I can't share this with you. It is really too traumatic to watch. But this individual is laying twisted on the lawn in that area, and his femur in his left leg is poking through his skin and jeans. And there is blood, like just, it's uncontrollable at the time that he arrives. It's pooling on the grass. We need to keep our blood inside us. Applying pressure to a wound like that's very difficult unless you have the right tool. It is not an easy thing to do. He was conscious. To the credit of the other driver, he was trying to comfort this individual. He's holding his hand, trying to keep him alert and awake. Anthony Maiola explains in the calmest and most dignified manner, "Sir, you're going to be okay. Just stay with me, okay? I'm going to put this on. It's going to hurt, but I need to get this tourniquet on to slow the blood." He explained everything. And this man's just like, "Please, just leave me be, let me go," that kind of stuff. He ends up positioning the tourniquet, and he got it as tight as he could. You know, yeah, your femoral artery in that area, the blood slowed to just a drop, a trickle compared to what was happening before. EMTs arrived on scene probably about 7-10 minutes later. Again, it's 12:15. They tend to him, they tried to tighten the tourniquet. They couldn't get it any tighter than Anthony had gotten it. And again, while he's doing this, he's trying to collect information, control the scene, find out who witnessed what had happened. You know, it's traumatic to people that are just there. Motorists pull up and see this, they're horrified. They want to bring water, they're trembling, and police are trying to keep everybody calm, gather what they need, control the scene, and get this gentleman to the hospital. Oak Valley ambulance, Oak Valley Fire showed up. They got him onto the rescue, got him to Rhode Island Hospital. The EMT that was at the scene told us that the doctor at the hospital told him if they had not applied a tourniquet when they did, he would not have survived. Lost alone, he probably would not have made it. Just a huge credit to him. And I didn't know about this. I looked for body-worn camera on the other thing I was going to talk about, and I came across this. And I was stunned because in the dispatch log, it's this blurb about going to a crash, applying a tourniquet, and moving on to the next call. These things are happening all the time. Maybe not to this gravity. It was that same weekend that we actually had somebody try to break into town hall. We got a suspicious activity report again. I think it was at about 10-11 o'clock at night. Motorist sees a couple of people shirtless running towards this property, abandoning a bike at Cheraho Furniture. Officers arrive. They can't figure out. They thought maybe it was a break at Cheraho Furniture, and ended up they were two people up on this upper deck in front of zoning. The police tried to calm them down. They went the other way. They scaled like, it was like, what's that, parkour? Exactly. Yeah, parkour. Very limber, sprinted down 112 south. Officers gave chase. It's pitch black, traffic's in the way. They did not catch him. However, they went back and grabbed the bikes, grabbed the backpacks that were there. And then Sergeant Laterio, to his credit, knows people that live in the area of Wilbur Hill, in that area that they were running into. It wasn't idle. You know, the suspense building.
I knew you.
That was my first suspicion. Yeah. So he very tactfully showed pictures of the bike and asked these parents to show it to their kids to see that school's on break. Okay. A couple of kids said, yeah, that looks like that might belong to somebody that lives in a neighborhood across from Wilbur Hill. And they went over there, they started to canvass that neighborhood. Within 24 hours, they knew who it was. The youth's parents were away, being watched by someone else. They wanted to listen to music on the deck, trespass, although their intentions were harmless, he initially denied it. But again, it's great police work, grabbing a bike, doing the legwork. That is how you solve an investigation. Lastly,
Did you give them back their bikes?
they get their bikes back.
They get the bikes
Yeah,
back?
once they admitted to their and accepted accountability, there's a governor on them. They can't go faster than 2 miles. Apparently, they run faster than me. So, lastly, somebody may have heard this. I actually saw it on the news. It wasn't a completely, they didn't capture what had really happened. It was an upside down vehicle at Horseshoe Falls and Sheep. Did anybody see that over the July 1st, July 2nd weekend? So, and they showed at that time, the news got out there. By the time the news got out there, what had really originally happened was already over. We got a call from Charlestown Police. We do a lot of mutual aid with one another. We share a border and we're all understaffed. And they were too far away from Horseshoe Falls. There was a panic 911 call about a car that went upside down with an operator in the middle of the river. And the river was swollen and raging. Swift water rescue is very dangerous, especially if you're dressed like this. Things that weigh a lot. You're hard to find when you go under, and frankly, you can't really swim very effectively with shoes and gun belt. So, Sergeant Laterio, Anthony Mayola, the individual I just mentioned, both of those individuals are on patrol third shift. They get there. They're one of the first on scene. Charlestown's there shortly, either just as or shortly thereafter. But they kind of size up what they have, and there is no easy way to get to this individual who's in the middle of the river. He actually launched off of the bridge and landed upside down in the middle of the river. And I watched this body cam footage. The horn is sounding through the whole thing. So how do you build stress? You're trying to communicate with something while there is a horn blaring. And actually, so this is actually Sergeant Laterio and Anthony Mayola's body cam. He's assisting with the line in case the sergeant goes in. That's the individual standing in the river. He's on high ground there, but the line gets thrown to him by the sergeant. Meanwhile, the individual saying, "Don't let me go." He's like despondent. He's impaired. This happens. People don't want to be saved. The next picture you can see, he's already tied it around his waist. And the sergeant tells him to start walking towards him, and he goes under out of view. Sergeant Laterio, not overly excited about this disappearing of the person you're trying to save. They've got him securely fastened on the line. He starts to swim towards them. You can show the next slide. Yeah, and now you can see him. He's resurfaced with the line. Then the next slide.
Can't show 5, it's too big. But I
Okay.
can show 6.
All right, 6 is they pull him out of the river. They save the guy's life. Swift water rescue, you could have had 1 or 2 dead first responders and this person dead trying to rescue him. This is, yes.
Is this guy a cousin of Evel Knievel?
He's not, but I tell you what, the fact that he didn't have compound fractures like the motorcyclist after launching himself, and because it's all rocks on the bottom, the current is so fast, there's nothing soft to land on.
Would they do it on purpose?
No,
Oh, okay.
but once he was in that predicament, wasn't overly happy with the history of his decisions. And just a credit to every one of you police officers in this town, particularly in this instance. Ontario, Roman Anthony Mingo, really, in these 2 instances, Paul Marshall, who was on scene with Anthony, just great police work. And there are people breathing today because of their actions.
God bless.
Thank you,
Thank
Chief.
Thank you.
All right, next is our Emergency Management Director, Randy.
Good evening. I'm here before you to get request for approval for our Homeland Security grant. We are given the option to put in the 3 separate grants here for the town. No cost to the town at all. It's 100% reimbursable if awarded.
There's no requirement for full payment or matching funds.
No matching fund.
Okay, excellent.
President, I'd like to make a motion to proceed with these grants.
Second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We could have called you up front. That would have been easy. You've been on here 2 hours.
Okay. Sean Lacy.
And council members, so I'm reporting tonight to request authorization to proceed with public hearing for purposes of regulating cannabis businesses in town. The council may recall, the voters may recall that last November, the general election, a referendum was put out to asking the voters whether or not they would support cannabis related businesses in the town. The vote was yes. So to that end, we have to change our regulations. So we would at this time ask to go out to public hearing, authorize review of those use regulations for both cannabis sales or as related to just recreational marijuana sales, but also along with just cannabis related businesses as well, processing, R&D, and so on and so forth. So I'm here before you tonight to request authorization for them.
Presently to make a motion to go out to a public hearing in regards to the public hearing for the zoning ordinance changes requested.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you, Sean.
Too much.
Okay, I'm gonna ask for like a 3-minute break.
Give us the 3 minutes, get your timer going.
Not 3.5, 3.
No.
Using that.
It depends on how long it takes to walk through it.
It's good.
Yeah. Like, the best weather we had was Memorial Day weekend.
It was.
All summer.
That was the nicest Memorial Day weekend I ever remember. It was like owned by sunny, gorgeous.
Since then, we haven't had 4 straight days of sun.
Every weekend's got thread of rain.
Next week's supposed to be good.
From your lips.
God,
Hold
on here, you can take an Uber. I would go away.
Bring the meeting back to order. So appointments and resignations, resignation of Sean Lacy as Richmond Town Planner. You can say,
Move to accept the resignation of Mr. Lacy as Richmond Town Planner.
Second,
With great regret.
with great regret.
Great appreciation.
Second.
okay, all those in favor?
Hi.
Discussion, real quick.
Discussion.
Sean, I want to thank you. You've been a consummate gentleman. My experience dealing with you on my level was excellent. You showed me that you have a heart, which to me is very important because we're dealing with human beings, not just numbers on a permit. And I have to commend you for being a decent human being. I've always sensed that in you, and to me is that is first and foremost in my view.
Express that my eyes were opened from November until now of all that you did. And I truly regret that you're leaving.
Can I say something just real quick?
Sure.
So I'll be super brief. So there's kind of a funny
Sean, after 4.5 years, you don't have to be so brief.
There's a kind of funny saying in this line of work and the line of city planning that you're not really doing your job if you're not making somebody upset, but I mean, everything that I've done in the 4.5 years here, I always put the needs of the town above all else. I tried to do the things as much as I could to try to position the town, I think, to put it in a direction I think that the people felt confident in going, and I am very optimistic, I think, about the future for this town. I think we're going the right direction. There's always going to be work to be done, but we were able to achieve quite a lot of things in the 4.5 years that I was here. And, so just want to thank everyone that supported me along the way. I wish my successor the best to hopefully carry on the good work and hopefully maintain that level of support. So thank you all.
Thank you.
And I just want to say, it breaks my heart you're gone.
Yes. Yes, please.
I just want to say, Sean has been great to work with. His shoes are giant to fill. It's definitely Richmond's loss, but gain for the Navy, and appreciate his time here and wish him the best in his career.
I saw the tremendous amount of economic development work that Sean did, and it really opened my eyes, and it really truly impressed me. And I hope we can find somebody who will continue his work, gain the trust of the developers and the businesses both in town and those who are looking to invest in our town. With that being said, Sean is here till the end of the month. So.
Yeah, we got you for a little bit more.
I'm still planning Sean until the 28th. So still got some work to do.
Motion, second.
I thought we voted.
No, we didn't vote.
No.
Oh.
Motion, a second.
Hi.
Aye.
Aye.
Regrettably, yes.
Yeah, regrettably, yes.
Okay, the next item is notice of non-renewal of Nell Carpenter for the zoning board of review.
Make a motion.
You don't need to make any motion.
Well, just a,
That's
let
your
her
expired.
Yeah, you
can
regret
say
that she's
something.
not, continuing as a zoning board member. I think that's a great loss to the town.
Yeah, her knowledge of the town and the workings of the town was beneficial. Okay, unfinished business. Discussion and consideration of fiscal year 23-24 tax resolution regarding the assessment and collection of tax.
So you do have the resolution in front of you. This is what allows us to assess and the collector to collect the taxes and I think those are things to do with the financial town meeting. Since we don't have it anymore, you guys have to do it.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Okay, thank you. Next is discussion and consideration resolution regarding fiscal year 23-24 budget amendment.
To approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Any discussion on it?
Okay.
Any discussion? Yeah.
Just so people know, it's $192,554 that is being not giving to this town from the state for the budget for 2024.
Because somehow the state feels that when we lose a few students in the school, all of a sudden we don't need to heat those rooms or maintain that building.
But I don't understand, why doesn't our portion go down of what we, like our share of 3 towns? Our share should have gone down of what we have to pay into the schools. Because the other schools will have a bigger percentage.
We had, Mr. President, we had this discussion with Superintendent Barry when he was superintendent. We posed the same question to him. When does the budget ever go down? When does our portion ever go down? And he said, never. And I said, we said, what if there's 1,000 students less? Then will it alter our payments to the school system, our share? And he goes, maybe 1,000. We're at 1,000. So I'm going to put on the agenda on next council meeting is to look and adjust. If the Richmond is down 45 students out of the 90, I propose taking off for transportation aid. We make the adjustment to what we pay Charo for the 45 students less.
Unfortunately, due to the Charahoe Act, which can't be opened up unless all 3 towns agree, that's something we can't do.
Yeah, we'll be sued immediately.
So the discussion is consideration of policy.
It would be more sending a message that we're going to start looking into this because now we're 1,000 students less than we were 15-20 years ago. Something's got to give.
Okay, so we started to vote. How do we vote?
Aye.
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 Hi.
Okay. Item number 3, discussion and consideration of a policy for appointments and reappointments to boards and commissions. I remember suggesting that, and now my mind is a blank as to what I wanted to do
I took notes while you were talking.
ranked voting.
I drafted this using the notes that I took and tried to include everything in here that I thought you wanted.
Yeah.
Mr. President,
Yes, ma'am.
I reviewed it and I like it. I think you did a good job, like looking into what we needed and didn't need. I did want to just say, I made a minor suggestion that we add the language from paragraph 8 regarding thank you letters to paragraph 9.
There's a reason it's not in.
Why?
In one case, the council takes an action, and
Okay.
in that motion, you always say.
Send a
and-
letter.
Yes, but in the second case, you don't, and that's why I added that.
Okay.
With that, I move to approve.
Second, but I had another question.
Okay, well, go ahead.
My other question was, it didn't say anything about my request to have the OMA refreshers by people looking for reappointment. I just want to confirm that's going to be on the reappointment form, so it's not necessary for it to be in this policy.
Right.
Right. And finally, can we have this be a part of our town council rules and procedures, so it's easily found.
That's how it was drafted as an addendum to the rules of procedure.
Perfect, all right,
Thank you very much.
Move to approve.
yes.
Yes,
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye,
yes.
Oh, yeah.
okay,
We already did that.
okay. New business. I would like to move item number 2 in place of item number 1 and discuss item number 1 after number 2.
For a motion?
I just made that motion. So,
Second.
okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, so these meetings, we had a meeting that ran till midnight. And I propose that after 3 hours, the meeting ends and we have to actually vote to continue it.
I think the school committee does that, Mr. President, so I think it's a good policy.
Well, I'm concerned because economic development is always at the end of the meeting. If we run out of time every time, it will never get it.
Well, it gets
Sure.
put to the next meeting.
And then it's at the end again.
Well, it can be put.
But guess what? Don't be long-winded. And you will need a whole lot, so you get.
So I can clarify, the order of the agenda is how it's submitted. Just so everybody is aware.
Well, we could submit.
Mr. President, at the beginning of council meetings, we have in the past moved items to the front. And we can do that if we need to. We can, you just did, right now, you just rearranged an item. That's actually a good point you brought up. I think we should do that more for town employees who are just here to ask for a grant. But I do want to suggest that instead of a 3-hour time, that we would make it a 9 p.m. stop, because like nights like tonight, we know that we're gonna go longer and we're planning for it. You know, so we start at 5 to make up for that. So having a 9 o'clock end gives you your 3 hours, but also gives us the flexibility to go from 5 if we needed.
Then maybe what we can do is anything that is on the agenda that we don't get to in terms of like new business, actually get put right to the beginning of the agenda, so we discuss it. You know, we can decide on put it after public, just after public forum or just before public forum. So that way then it gets addressed right away. It doesn't get buried again, just in case we.
Mark, can I add a couple things?
Sure.
I think if you want to do anything about this, you would want to make an amendment to the rules of procedure to include it. The rules of procedure, as Aaron just pointed out, include the order of agenda items.
Mhm.
So if you want to change that, you would have to amend that in the rules of procedure. I think what Sam was saying is that you could do it on a case-by-case basis if you need to. And you don't need to amend the rules of procedure to do that.
Right.
But if you want to, if you want a provision that meetings cannot go past 9 p.m. unless a majority of council members vote to continue, that can be added to the rules.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that we add that to the rules. And procedure.
I'll give you a draft and put it on your next agenda, just so you can look at it and print and see if you like.
Is there
I'm
second
also
to the
wondering if
motion?
maybe we should start at 5 o'clock.
No, I can't do that. I work
Okay.
out of state. I work in Connecticut.
Yeah, I'm asked to leave work early when we meet at 5, and okay, sometimes it's okay.
Okay.
Mr. President. I also wanted to just suggest that we as a council look at what we're doing that we can do, or things that we can do to shorten our meetings. I do think that interrupting each other is a problem, like you were just gonna do. It's ongoing. It's been happening since the beginning. Nobody's exempt from it. So I think that we as a council need to follow Robert's rules, because that was made to make sure that everybody's voices are heard, but also to have our meetings run efficiently. So if we could get back to that, which is in our rules and procedures, then we can be more efficient. So thank you.
I think that, Mr. President, I think that's really up to you to, you know, keep tabs on that. really.
I try, but
Yeah.
I also try and let people speak until it becomes repetitive or redundant, and then I try and curtail it.
Well, I don't think there was a second to your motion, but I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. My next item, and I'm actually, now I can combine these two items. I had a conversation with Laura, and many of the things that we were seeking grants from Senator Reed's office are now requiring matching funds. And I also feel that we have a lot going on that Sean has been working on regarding the economic development, and I don't think it would be the best use of our money to, oh, I just mixed up. So I'm talking about 3 here. Yeah, I know, I meant to. So Sean had proposed a design study, and one of the developers that is interested in developing or redeveloping in town is also looking for some kind of information regarding that. What are the plans for Main Street, whether or not they're going to change the curb cuts, radiuses, widen the road, etc. And I was wondering if, Sean, if you could give a really brief rundown on what this Wyoming design study is.
So I'll just take a quick step back. So with respect to design guidelines in Wyoming, so that concept, that idea came out of our conference. And the intent behind that idea was it was intended for a long range vision for what we want our downtown to look like, right? What type of guidance we can provide investors, landowners in making Main Street basically look better than what it is now, right? So that process, it's the process of reimagining our downtown is not just a one thing. It's not like a one-off. It's a multifaceted approach, right? You got to look at your use regulations. You got to look at design guidelines. You got to work with the state on trying to put together a new vision for that particular corridor of 138. You need to start looking at your infrastructure. Like there's just a lot of different things, right? But this is part of it. This is part of the equation. So what you'll remember was in this past year's budget, I had asked for $20,000 for FY24 and $20,000 for FY25 in capital improvement funds, so that we have basically half the project funded for this year, and then the other half would be requested for next year for a total of $40,000. So that in year 2 or year 3 of that CIP window, we can go out for RFQ. We can find a design firm or a design company that can basically put together a revisioning for Wyoming. Something very similar that some of you may remember that we did years back in Shannock. Shannock has design guidelines so that if and when the time comes for those property owners to revisit those properties and reinvest in those properties, what do you want that village to look like? So it keeps the character of that village intact. By the way, someday in the not too distant future, maybe we'll see something happen with the former Clark Mill. I really hope so.
With what?
Former Clark Mill.
Oh, Clark.
In Shannon, right? And a property like that would be using the design guidelines to ensure that the design aesthetic is acceptable to not just people that live in that village, but to the town. It keeps the charm intact. Right? Well, we're trying to do something very similar to that idea in Wyoming. Again, it comes right out of our comp plan. It's an objective, right? So, I do want to say, Mr. President, thank you for revisiting the concept, because as you all know, that project got defunded with this year's budget. So everything got pushed out years, right? We'd have to ask for it again in CIP funds for next year.
Well, to me, this is really important for economic development too. I mean, at a meeting with a developer, the developer was asking certain questions regarding this. And it's really important as an engine for economic development. And this is this is going to result in something that we can put forward and that we can use to work with development.
I will say that $20,000 in ARPA funds basically covers half the cost right? You know, if we're talking ARPA funds, if I may be so bold, you know, $40,000 basically would capture the anticipated cost estimate for getting a design firm on board, which would allow the town to get theoretically, you know, go up for RFQ a year earlier.
I'd like to make.
Not have to dip into your 5-year CIP, which is taxpayer money.
Right.
So it's just something I want to throw out there.
Yeah, I mean, I had considered that.
I'd like to make a motion to give them 40,000 to get this Wyoming study.
Okay,
Discussion.
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 Yeah,
ARPA funds.
ARPA fund.
You want economic development,
Do we have,
you gotta start there.
right, well, let's do the vote, if you want to talk about it.
You just did.
Okay,
was
so
all.
I want to talk about it.
Okay,
Sean, my concern is that apparently Capstone is ready to go as soon as, now that we've passed the aquifer overlay. So is it not a waste for us to be doing our own thing when they have their own thing? If we know we're gonna have to change the road size and
It's
all the infrastructure based on what they need.
there's more to it, Helen. So, you know, we're talking about, you know, a lot of you have been talking about one developer, another developer, a third developer. We got to look at it town-wide. There are literally dozens upon dozens of properties in this region, right? We're not just talking about one singular landowner, right? I mean, there are not all developers and landowners are treated equally, that's true. But what we're really looking at is guidelines that will guide reinvestment for not just, you know, one property or other properties on Main Street, but, you know, as we connect into Route 3, as we start to transition into Hope Valley and in
So
Hope
that's
Valley.
still called Wyoming up there on Route 3.
As you start to get into Hopkinton, it starts to become Hope Valley, you know. So, you know, we're looking at a design approach or design guidelines that cover, in my opinion, right, you know, everything basically west of Route 95 or of I-95, you know, maybe further into the northerly and southerly portions of Route 3. I mean, we're looking at a bigger scope. And that's where I think there's value in putting together design guidelines, because if and when those properties do flip, or you get someone who's ready to pull the trigger on reinvestment, you know, there's some guidance. They have an idea of what we're looking for as far as a design aesthetic, the scale, the massing, the design features, the fenestrations, the window organization. There's just so many things to architecturally that you think about that has an effect to a pedestrian and to a cyclist and so on, and a motorist. So that was the whole idea. So like I said, you know, $20,000 would certainly cover the half, and I appreciate that you've decided to revisit this. 40,000 would basically earmark it for, you know, no taxpayer money, and theoretically we'd be able to. It's not going to happen on my watch, but
yeah.
it'd start on, you know, it would enable, you know, the town to initiate that process a year early.
I mean,
It's not a bad idea.
We push too many things off, and we revisit these things over and over again. I would just like to properly fund it, move forward with it, and make it part of the economic driver for our town.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Thank you. I was really disappointed we had to take this away from the budget, so I'm definitely in favor of it and really looking forward to seeing what we can do as a team to move this Wyoming area forward.
John, I got a quick question for you.
Yep.
Now with the Capstone, obviously you've been talking with them and whatnot. Is this going to expedite their redevelopment of it, or is it going to, again, by the time we get all this information, then they're going to be able to move on this, or can they move on it and we can adjust these things, because we already have a pretty good idea what we want. I mean, I don't have to have somebody come in and tell me, all right, this is what it's going to look like. I already got a pretty good idea. We've done enough of these. I want to expedite it for Capstone to get the project up and going faster, so we're not waiting another year or two to clarify certain things with them. That's my concern.
So you know, every landowner operates on their own timetable. right? There's nothing that would preclude anybody from, throwing money into their property and coming in with a design concept for any property right now, right? Well, any design guidelines project is running concurrent. So I don't know if that gives you any confidence one way or the other, Mike. I'm just saying that, when you're dealing with specific developers, they operate on their own timetable. Some of those issues that individual property owners are dealing with are very complicated, as a businessman yourself, So I guess what I would say is design guideline study wouldn't necessarily interfere with anyone's ability to
Yeah,
make
because,
investments.
because again, like we know, they're watching. And they're listening to what we discuss and whatnot. And time is money. And, for these developers to hear that, well, we're not gonna get full blast out of the gate because now we've got to do this, town's gonna do a study. And it's gonna, take us a little more time. I would like to make them feel like they can present their project and we can get it expedited to them, for them as soon as possible.
Mr. President,
Yeah,
it's my understanding this doesn't prevent anybody from doing anything. It just helps us move forward.
it sets goalposts like the aquifer protection overlay amendments. It sets goalposts, and now the developer knows where they need to go.
It gives you a roadmap and a vision so that the developers who are doing their work, doing their own, whatever it is that they do, because I'm not a developer, gives them the ability to know that there's a plan, there's a vision of it for the town. This isn't a stumbling block. This is an addition and a guidance. It helps them, it helps us.
Can I add something, Mark?
Sure.
This would not prevent them from doing what they're doing. It would enhance your ability to do.
Okay, that's what I want to hear, because when you deal with a big firm like Capstone, they dealt with these projects
Yes.
all
Yes.
over the country. They already know what to do. If you just give them some basic guidelines,
They
as
want to
what you
know,
want,
they
they've
want to know
already
what,
done this
what-
10 times.
they want to
20
know what
times
we
over.
want them to do.
Right,
That's what they want to know. And
basic
when we do
guidelines.
the study, we'll have a much better way to explain.
Well, even before this comes to fruition with these concrete guidelines, the goalposts, these corporations, these big developers have done this 20 times over, all over the country. So they already know what we're probably looking for. So I would say to them, bring us your proposal, all right, to what some basic guidelines that we're proposing. And then if it looks good, we'll expedite it, so we can get that eyesore up and running the way it should.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
So,
Mr. President,
Yeah,
we have a motion on the floor.
Well, we
So I
haven't
would-
finished discussing. Excuse me.
I said, Mr. President, I have the floor. We need to stop interrupting each other so we can work efficiently, please. I lost my train of thought. I was gonna really just echo what has already been said, that this is not about one developer. This isn't about two developers. This is about the whole Wyoming section. And I know where Wyoming is and I want to see it thrive. And at that, I'm ready to vote. So let's,
Mr.
when everyone else
President-
is, let's go forward. Thank you,
Mr. President, one of my concerns is it got, the money for that was pulled because we couldn't afford it with the budget. So where are we gonna get the money to pay for it?
upper funds.
Are you gonna pull it from economic development?
Yes. Yep. Because this is other economic
You just
development.
approved the money. We just approved money for an economic development person, like,
Well, that's
Last
on, that's
meeting.
on an agenda item that comes up next.
Mr. President, one more thing, just to clarify, we currently have, according to the spreadsheet we received
200
today,
and- Go ahead.
$75,940. So we can allocate 40 without, we can speak of these as if they're two separate agenda items.
Because they are.
Right, so again, I'd like to move the question.
but I want, just to be clear, I want Wyoming to be beautiful. I just don't want us to take away money from us getting an economic development coordinator or director or whatever we wanted, whatever term is the politically correct term. Someone to drive economic development.
And again, to spin off from Councilor Sheehan, again, I've dealt with these developers. They already know what to do. They just need the okay, and they will do it pretty much the way we want without having to stall it even longer to come up with these studies.
Okay, so let's,
There's a motion.
So am I clear that we have enough ARPA money to keep our economic development person and put the money into the,
There's $75,940 unallocated right now, so regardless of what happens in your next agenda item, there is still money to do this.
okay, all right, then I could be in favor of it.
okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, motion passes. The next agenda item is item number 3. And what I noticed, or what I've realized in the last 7 months, and I mentioned this, was that Sean was doing a great job as basically an economic development director. He's been working with all these developers, and he's got a lot of things going on that, were they to bear fruition, would really help the town financially and really mesh with what we're all trying to do here. I feel that hiring an economic development employee, I've always been against hiring an employee, a director or some town employee. And I continue to be against that. And I also feel that running through our meager rules, regulations, and codes would be a waste of taxpayer money that could be used for concrete things we would purchase, and studies that we would pay for, and even a sign out front with a digital readout on it so that we could advertise meetings and votes and so on. I just would rather see the money used for something that will give an absolute definite benefit rather than to be used on something that might give a benefit. So-
Could I quickly add something to what you just said
Sure.
about the proposal that we hire someone to do a review of the ordinances and regulations?
Right.
I don't know how many of you are aware of it, but the General Assembly made massive changes to land use law at the end of the last session. These are the biggest changes in 30 years. And they will require us to rewrite probably most of the zoning ordinance, much of the subdivision regulation. I'm not sure what value there would be now in reviewing the regulations and ordinances that we have when we know we will have to enact new ones by next January 1st.
Mr. President,
Yes.
on this topic, I think that I've been extremely clear from the beginning. That I'm not in favor of a development director, whether it be contractor or employee. To me, the spending's the same, the job's the same, it's just a different title. So I've been extremely clear why. If you have any questions, feel free to bring it up. And at first, I really was in favor of the ordinance review. I thought that was a really great idea, but that was before all these changes really were approved and Mr. Ellsworth just mentioned came through. So that one, I think that we should hold off on as well. And that's really all.
Any other discussion?
I have a letter here from the Economic Development Chair, Brian LeBuck, and I'd like to read his letter into the record.
Sure.
Dear Richmond Town Council, as chairman of the EDC, I am truly sorry I could not be here tonight. But I would like to make a statement regarding the use of the remaining opera monies that has been previously earmarked for the EDC. As Unified Economic Development Committee, along with some members of the Town Council, as stated at previous council meetings, we strongly believe an ordinance review is something that is necessary in keeping the town's momentum moving forward. A review has not been done, to my knowledge, for quite some time, if at all. The benefits of reviewing the ordinances would eliminate redundancies, updating current ordinances, and become business friendly and omitting inconsistencies. As it is now, the ordinances are a stymie on why businesses and developers do not consider Richmond in their geographical building location. The stigma needs to be changed in Richmond to flatline the tax base. As we look back to our presentation, which now the council has some time to digest, the other crucial piece of the puzzle would be eventually hiring an EDC director / consultant to keep progression moving. Dedicating an individual consultant to take on the task of being the point of contact, conducting research, and being able to advocate for the growth is nothing but advantageous to maintain the continuation of growth. After all this, it's for the taxpayers of Richmond. They would like to see the monies remain earmarked for the Economic Development Committee. Implementing these changes, reviews are necessary to keep Richmond on the current path of business growth. The council is the council to make the change and provide the solutions for the taxpayers of Richmond. Remember, we still want to remain country, but there are plots of land and corridors we can utilize to bring businesses in without running the look and feel of the town, ruining the look and feel of the town. Thank you, Brian, for both.
Thank you. So to address some of those topics, like Solicitor Ellsworth had mentioned, we are going to have to redo many of our codes and ordinances to meet the state's requirements. So although I understand his concern, it's going to be done anyway.
Yeah, well, he wrote that before.
Right.
I mentioned that, but then the other aspect of it is the economic development director coordinator. In whatever town that is successful in bringing in business, they do have a town planner and they do have an economic development director. And I've worked under two of them, two different cities. We need it. We can take the view of, we need a wellness director, all right, because of the need of some bodies of people in this town. And I think we have to also look as an economic development director / consultant as somebody we need, all right, that comes with the expertise to move this town forward and bring these developers in, because they come with their little black book if you hire the right person. They have all the connections and whatnot. And to burden a person like Mr. Lacy, all right, we're doing economic development and planning. I don't think that's a good mix, because any town that's successful on it has two separate departments.
Okay.
Mr. President, Mr. Lacy has said that economic development is not part of his job.
Okay.
Mr. President, especially, we've discussed this at length.
I know.
I'd like to respectfully ask council if we have nothing new to add, that we please just.
Well, I wanted to let
keep it going.
Louise speak.
Are you trying to keep the council meeting down to 9 o'clock?
About an hour 15.
Good evening, Louise Dinsmore from Richmond. I had some prepared remarks, but literally Mr. LeBeau's remarks were mirror images of what I was going to say. And so I'm not gonna be redundant. But my remarks mirror his in that our committee has been united on trying to establish a path forward. The item under consideration says, new business J3, request of President Trimmer for discussion and consideration of reassigning ARPA funds of $15,000 and $135,000 previously earmarked for ordinance review / economic development employee to be reassigned to match federal grants. So I contacted the town administrator this week, and I asked her some questions about the second part of this agenda item, to be reassigned to match federal grants. And I asked Karen what was the status of the grant application for Senator Reed. She did indicate that there were 3 items out of 4 that was moved to the next level for a federal earmark: police radios, the radio tower, and a senior center elevator. I have a lot of experience with federal grants. It's part of my job in my, my daytime job is working with nonprofits on grant applications. I haven't seen any of the federal earmarks require a federal match. So Laura, if Reed's office is asking you for a requirement for a federal match, did they contact you? Did they put that in writing? I'm curious. I've worked on 3 capital projects that had federal earmarks, And not one penny of the millions of dollars that came into my clients required a federal match.
I will defer to Karen, but in order for the projects to go forward, they asked if we would be able to put a match to have that project then be considered.
So basically, what I would infer from that is we'd like to be able to fund these 3 items, but we might not be able to fund all of it. So perhaps if you were able to match some of it, a dollar for dollar match or a 50-cent on a dollar match could give you everything that you want on your wish list, those 3 items. Is that what I'm hearing?
I don't remember what the amounts were.
Did they put it in writing or they just called on the
No.
phone?
Okay.
It's not on writing.
We're at the 3-minute mark, so.
Okay, so what I would say is, in closing, if you are going to, in looking at the agenda item, to be reassigned to match federal grants, if we don't have anything in writing from the senator's office asking us to do this, then I would say that in the spirit of this agenda item, I would say that you would not move forward until you have something in writing from Senator Reed's office making that requirement. Thank you.
Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, but we had a match for the police station
Yes.
in the last federal earmark.
Yes, we did.
So
Okay.
it's not unheard of that there is a match for a federal earmark.
Okay, it
Not-
depended on what agency it was actually coming from and funded through.
Not unheard of, but I think I would feel much better if you're going to be taking away money that you previously earmarked. I would love to see something in writing from the senator's office that said, we're going to require you to match this money. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments?
Going along with, Mr. President, going along with Louise Dinsmore said, even the roadworks project, you know up front what the matching portion is in order to receive the grant. When these grants are written, my experience has been, you get all the criteria up front for what this grant is. Because they can't keep you in the dock right at the very end.
Can't move the
They actually
goalposts.
do.
Can't move
They
the
actually
goalposts. Point of
do.
order, address the president, please, audience.
Sorry, Mr. President, can't move the goalposts.
Go ahead, Laura,
There's 3 chairs there.
please. Well,
So these particular grants are not your ordinary grants that they put out a request for a grant application. These are earmarked funds that get attached to particular bills. So they are not your ordinary grant application.
So in other words, with that grant, you may not get as much money as you anticipated. So then you're looking for more money on another end to fill the gap.
There's many variables to these grants until such time as they are approved with a particular bill.
I have one more comment that's really important to this
All right, go
conversation.
ahead.
Thank you. So, also, Karen Pinch was very kind in articulating to me what 3 items made it through to the next level in Senator Reed's office. One was police radios, and number 2 was a radio tower for a $300,000 potential appropriation. Now, forgive me if I'm wrong and if I'm misreading this spreadsheet on the ARPA fund. There was $500,000 appropriated in ARPA money for emergency radio tower from a federal appropriation. So if that's the case, why are we asking for another $300,000 for the radio tower if we've already appropriated $500,000 for the radio tower?
That I'm not sure about.
When I look at the spreadsheet, I only see it on one.
Under reserved, emergency operation radio.
So it's not on there twice, as I believe is what you're saying.
No, what I'm
Unless I'm misunderstanding.
Nope,
She's asking.
I'm just,
asking for free, But wouldn't
yes.
we want to free up additional ARPA money?
and if that's the intent, then that's the intent, but I just want to make sure that everybody understands that the grant application that was moved forward to the next level had a $300,000 appropriation for emergency operation radio tower. And we've already appropriated $500,000 for that. So if you want to move money around, you can move money around. That's your decision as a council to do that. But I just want to make sure that we're transparent about what this money is going for and that we're not taking money away from economic development to reassign it to match a federal grant when there's been no stipulation for that in writing up to this point. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. President, she mentioned the tower. We had discussed this before. What is the price for the new tower?
That 300,000 is for site work.
And
And the
half
tower
million-
itself
half
is,
million is just for the tower? So
The Rhode Island EMA is donating and putting in the infrastructure on their dime for that site. And that's $300,000 in site work, is my understanding.
So they're doing that for
They
the
just,
town?
I'm just gonna clear the air here.
okay, go ahead.
So, yes, there's 500 put aside for the radio tower. The project she is talking about is the same project. I know President Trimmer put on for federal matching and everybody's trying to be very specific about what that federal match is for. I believe the intent was just to deallocate money and have funding available for
concrete,
federal grants
actionable things.
when they come, be it the ones that are already there if we need additional funding or something, but I think it probably is complicated by the discussion of and make it federal match. I think
That's one of the reasons why I wanted to deallocate those two amounts. The other is that I don't feel an economic, a review of codes and ordinances is necessary anymore.
I think tying the two together and being very specific wasn't necessarily your intent when you
No,
put through.
it wasn't a dollar for dollar. We're not taking $5 from an EDC director and moving it to a $5
federal
purchase,
grant.
right?
I just
Mr. President.
wanted to try to clarify that.
Right, so what you'd like to do is remove the previously allocated money and just have it be a part of the pool that's available,
Right,
right?
that's it.
Makes sense to me. I'll make a motion. If we don't have a motion. I'll make a motion to approve that request.
I'll second that.
Okay, any
Further
further?
discussion? So just to be clear, the council approved getting an economic development consultant or whatever. We even put it, yes, we did put that money aside, and now we're taking
That's
it
different.
back.
Right,
Mr. President, can I clarify? I never agreed to hire anybody.
Maybe
Or
you
hire,
did.
no,
The
like,
council approved.
excuse me, I'm so sorry. We need to stop interrupting each other if we're gonna get anywhere.
Well, I was talking and
Everybody.
you
I
started
said to the
talking.
president, he gave you.
hold on,
the
let Helen
She had the
finish,
floor.
please,
That was fine, yeah.
You have the floor.
please finish.
So I just, see, we know that there's no one in the town whose job it is to be responsible for economic development. Karen said that in a meeting here, and Sean also said that's not his job. So somebody has to take the lead of making it happen. So now we're just pulling the money out of it, and we're gonna put it aside in case we want to do something else. I just don't,
And
Mr. President,
Yeah, go ahead.
thank you. When we previously assigned the money to go towards these initiatives, I made it very clear when the motion was happening and the discussion was going on, that we would be able to change our minds if we had not seen that this is a way we wanted to go. You can go back, you can watch the tape, maybe it's in the minutes, but that's how it went down. We never agreed to hire somebody. We never agreed really not to hire somebody either. It's just something that we were thinking about doing. So for budgeting and planning purposes, we wanted to put that money aside. That way we could still see what else was out there and what else we had to work with. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. President, just that, Council Sheehan, when you're trying to change the direction of a ship, you have to steer the ship in that direction. Because if not, if you keep the ship in the direction it's going in, you're gonna ground it and you're gonna hit the rocks. The way the policies have been running in this town for the last 10 to 15 years our taxes have gone up over 30%, 33% in the last 6 years. We have now the second highest property tax town in the state. We could actually be number one now.
Okay,
With the,
we
with the, with the, with the new
discussed
stats.
this ad nauseam.
That's why we have to change the direction of the ship, Mr. President, because the infrastructure and the players to be that are on the team that have been steering the ship, we're now the second highest property tax town in the state. Things have to change. And you can't ignore it because, no, so one more second, please.
So we have a motion on the floor, Karen.
When I, Mr. President, when I mentioned the figures about where the second
Point of
highest
order,
property
you
tax
have to
tax-
get permission from the president to speak, just ask.
He's just speaking anyway. It's what he's.
I bring these facts up to our town manager.
Maybe you should be a finance director.
And nobody concurs that we're the second highest property tax town, our taxes are astronomical. Nobody concurs with that, and that scares me. That scares me. It really does, that a finance director can sit here and not say a word. And she's our bean counter.
Okay, Karen,
If I could just clarify roles and responsibilities with regard to economic development. I
right,
said it's not my job. Sean has said his not his job. It doesn't mean there is not economic development happening in this town. Just as a normal course of Sean's job, he does economic development. It doesn't mean he goes out and seeks developers. There's kind of two different things you have to understand. It's not that it's not happening, and it's not that there aren't things on the horizon. There are absolutely things on the horizon.
right,
Motion and second.
okay. Vote. How do you vote?
Nay.
Nay.
Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
okay.
But you keep getting your tax rolls.
We had a great budget. Somehow it got voted down.
Mr. President, please keep it to the.
Yes, thank you. So the next item I had, I had a long conversation with Scott. Scott, who's gonna be retiring soon. And Scott really recommended, he says we have a comp plan which covers a lot of ground. But he suggested that we set up a workshop and the department heads could discuss with the town council a 2-year plan for the town hall for succession, for different things to be planned and different departments to work together on. So what I wanted to do was just to come up with a date that everyone could meet so that we could discuss that. And all,
Organize that.
okay,
After the meeting, we can send out. some
Okay.
notice dates and put the basic out there.
so we don't need to vote on that or anything. Okay, good. Excellent. Last is item number 4, discussion and consideration to amend the Richmond Code of Ordinance, Chapter 10.06, street stop signs, and authorize the town clerk to advertise for a public hearing.
Mr. President.
Yeah.
Thank you. Motion to approve the town clerk to authorize the public hearing.
Second.
All those in
I
favor?
have a question.
Oh, you go ahead.
In the paper that you put out, it says that the place where you want to put a stop sign is in Exeter.
No, it's not. That was my question too. That's why it took me so long to get that on their agenda.
Yeah.
The town line between Richmond and Exeter is on Gardner Road. It goes right down the middle of Gardner Road.
Yeah.
Hog House Hill Road is in Exeter, but the 3-way intersection is half in Richmond and half in Exeter. The stop sign would be on the Richmond side of the line on Gardner Road going south.
All right, that's my question.
If I
That's
might,
my question too.
there's the stop sign going north, which is the Exeter side.
Exeter side.
There is a stop sign on the Hog House Hill Road end side. There's no stop sign on the southbound lane, which fronts all of those Richmond.
Okay, as long as it's a legal thing to put the sign there.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's our street. We own that part of the street.
Okay.
Okay, so all those in, how do you vote?
Aye.
Aye,
Hi.
okay,
Geez, chief, now that ticket revenue is gonna go up, now that we get that stop sign over there.
We don't work that kind of revenue.
okay, next is the work session to discuss EDC items.
Well, Mr. President, it seems like those are next. So there's
Well,
nothing
item
to-
number one,
Yeah,
A,
not the first.
Well,
is a $5,000 grant proposal for small businesses to locate in town, which is again a concrete.
but here's the problem. Can I talk about it?
Sure.
I looked at this. It's called the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds. Overview is called the final rule.
Right,
And this says this is not open to new businesses. It's only open, it says to be eligible, a small business must have experienced negative economic impacts or disproportionate impacts of the pandemic. Because this grant program is for new businesses, it does not appear that the proposed small business grant program would be eligible to use ARPA funds.
We've already vetted that with iParametrics and we are
And they
eligible to
said-
use it for that.
So they,
That was the first thing I did before I started to work on these drafts. I got in touch with Laura and I said, please find out specifically whether or not we are allowed to use this money for this.
Let me help clarify.
yeah, because it's
The
pretty
funding,
clear it's not.
it
allowed.
is under that. If you look under revenue replacement category, when you're looking at how we're using our ARPA funds as opposed to the other categories,
Okay,
it's a much broader use.
okay.
So look under revenue recovery funding. That's what we're going with for all of our $2 million.
Okay.
Just to help you out. And
Yeah.
I understand where you read
It does
that,
help, yeah.
but it does help.
and I know I previously mentioned that I'd like to be able to offer a similar type of grant to businesses that were investing substantial amounts of money in the town that are already here. We can't just, or we can, but I'd like to not just limit it to new businesses that come and relocate here, but other businesses that decide, wow, Richmond has been good to me. I really want to invest more money in the town. And we would help to supplement that.
Actually, that's the way I wrote it.
Oh, excellent.
It's not. Samantha had suggested that to be eligible, you would be in the process of starting a business. And I thought about that and I decided that it was probably not a good idea to put anyone in the position of having to review business plans who didn't have the expertise to do that. That it was made a lot more sense to make the grants available to people who had already started a business and were just getting it off the ground, or people who were moving to town, or people who were here already but wanted to expand.
Right.
Mr. President, and I'm amenable to that. I read over what was given to us and I thought that all the changes were good. I did have just a couple questions. The deadline to apply, I didn't know if we needed more time. If it could maybe be like end of October or
That's a
something.
placeholder.
Right, okay.
I
So-
sent it
figured
to
it was.
Karen and Laura to see if they had, any comment, and I haven't received any back, but.
We have.
And I wasn't really done though. I did have other concerns, not concerns, questions. So
Can I just
I was
interject
going-
something real quick?
I would like to finish what I'm saying, because that's usually how we do things. I don't know, I was thinking end of October, giving us a couple months to, 2 months to review by the end of the year. But also there was a mention of an interview, and I wanted to know who would give that interview. Was that admin, town council? What happens there?
Well, what I had in mind, and this is obviously, this is just a proposal, this is not.
Mhm.
What usually happens in these situations, when the town is hiring somebody, for instance, or, vetting people, the town administrator takes charge of the project and she puts together a committee of people.
Right.
For instance, when we pre-approve engineering consultants for the planning board list that they keep the rotating list. She puts together a committee of people who get together and look at all the applications and rank them and talk about the different applicants and decide who's qualified.
Excuse me, just for a second, wouldn't it be fitting to have a few members of the EDC? as
Oh, yeah,
part of
and the
the
council too.
Yeah.
But I think that you would want to put the town administrator in charge of organizing this, because that's her job.
Right,
But she could have members of the EDC, members of the town council on the committee too, and interviewing people for the grants.
that would be great. It would give flexibility to the town administrator.
Because I don't think
Good
you'd
job.
want to give anybody this amount of money without talking to them in person.
Right.
Right.
I was just more curious about the process, so thank you for clarifying.
President, just to let the public know the total amount of grant money we're talking about and how much per grant you're talking.
Well, we did allocate $45,000 and we talked about $5,000 grant per
40,000.
40,000, okay, and
And I just to throw a thought out there, because we don't want to nix, like you said, Mr. President, the existing businesses here in town. Out of that 40,000, I'd like to see maybe 50-50. 50% of that money goes to existing businesses here in town. The other 50% will be for luring new businesses into town. Just as a thought.
If I could make a suggestion,
Sure.
instead of setting a ratio like that, you might want to develop a list of criteria that's going to be used to decide who gets the grants, and add that as one of the criteria, whether they're already here and how long they've been here.
I don't want to solidify a 50-50 thing, because I want us to have the flexibility.
That's what I mean.
And not only that, if $40,000 gets given out between new and existing businesses, we should do more. If we can get businesses
Cross
to
that road.
locate, right? So, I mean, I would just like to see how this goes. $40,000 in the big scheme of things is not a whole lot of money. And I'd like to see how this goes, and
There's
based on how it goes,
also, Mr. President, a timeframe on the money to be spent.
right?
Right.
That to be spent by the end of 2024. Or else we
Oh,
lose
that,
it.
yeah, that's
Okay,
great.
so Louise is getting some input.
2024.
Louise Dinsmore again, part of the EDC. So this was actually, I think I mentioned this in one of my comments at an earlier council meeting. This was actually considered as part of our recommendations in the presentation that we were going to make to the town council back in the spring. This grant sort of opportunity was one of the things that we considered for our recommendations, but we didn't want to pick winners and losers. We didn't want to have the grants just for new businesses. So if there's a way, Solicitor Ellsworth, that we can put something in the language
It
that would
is.
include
already
existing
there.
businesses
It's
and
in there
potential
already.
new businesses. Okay,
Did you read the agenda items?
I did read the agenda.
Yeah,
items, but
it's
I
in
thought I
there.
just said,
It's in there already.
if you're relocating to Richmond, if you're a new business that came here from January 1, 2023.
Right.
So where's the existing businesses in that language?
That want to expand.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any further discussion, or do we want to vote? Do we have a motion? I don't even remember at this point.
If you would like to, you can adopt this as a model. And then ask the town administrator to put together a group of people that can get more specific about what the criteria is for selection. What the dates are gonna be, that kind of stuff. Because that part you didn't discuss in great detail.
Mm.
And I put these in more or less as placeholders. So that you could make a decision later when you've already discussed it, how exactly you want to do it in terms of the dates that you want to establish.
Right.
The criteria that you want to establish, and who you want to review everything.
Okay, sounds like a plan. I just want to get it rolling.
Yeah,
and-
it makes
and-
sense.
and implement. So that being said, am I allowed to make a motion? I make a motion to approve that as discussed, and add to it as needed.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
okay,
Mr. President,
yes, ma'am.
given our prior conversation, I guess I'll do a motion to file A, B, and C.
Any discussion required? And that being said, how do you vote?
Aye.
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 Aye. Mr. President,
Yes.
you can have it, sorry. You seem
Motion
so
to
mad.
file
I'll need to bring it up again later, right?
communication.
No, this is the
Proclamation.
communication.
Right. Motion to file.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Mr. President.
This is communications and petition.
Oh, file those, yes.
Mr. President,
Yes.
motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Yeah.